Red sky at night. Shepherd's delight. For centuries, before meteorologists predicted storms with satellite imagery and Doppler radar, people looked to the sky with a careful, practiced eye. Among these ancient observers, shepherds held a unique place. Their lives depended not on clocks or calendars, but on the subtle signs written in the colors and moods of the heavens. One of the most enduring proverbs from this wisdom is the phrase, "Red sky at night, shepherd's delight." This simple rhyme is far more than quaint folklore. It is a centuries-old survival tool, an oral record of natural weather patterns that shaped rural life, trade, and even warfare. Imagine a shepherd in medieval Europe, standing watch over his flock as the sun sinks toward the western horizon. The sky bursts into shades of crimson and fiery orange, a vibrant canvas painted by the setting sun. For that shepherd, the red sky is not just beautiful, it's a promise of clear skies and calm weather for the coming day, a chance to tend the sheep without fear of sudden storms, flooding, or bitter winds. But why does this phenomenon happen? And how did it become so ingrained in cultural wisdom across continents and centuries? The answer lies in the science of atmospheric optics and weather patterns, intertwined with the way prevailing winds sweep across the globe. The red glow at sunset comes from sunlight passing through a thick layer of dust and moisture in the atmosphere. When the setting sun is low on the western horizon, its light travels through more of the Earth's atmosphere, scattering shorter blue wavelengths and allowing longer red and orange wavelengths to dominate. This effect is intensified when the sky to the west is clear because the sun's rays reflect off particles in a clean, stable atmosphere. In the temperate zones of Europe, where shepherding was a central livelihood, prevailing winds most often come from the west. This means that a red sky at night signals that the air coming from the west is free of storms or heavy clouds. The calm weather is literally on its way, making the night and the next day pleasant. Conversely, a red sky in the morning often indicates that a storm front is moving in from the west, bringing rain and rough weather, which is why the proverb continues, "Red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning." Historically, this knowledge was vital. Shepherds depended on good weather to move flocks to fresh pastures, to protect their animals from exposure, and to avoid the treacherous mud and swollen rivers that heavy rains could create. Medieval villages relied heavily on the health of their sheep for wool, milk, and meat, essential commodities in their economy. A storm at the wrong time could mean the loss of valuable livestock, starvation, and economic ruin. The use of natural weather lore like this is documented in various cultures, dating back to ancient Greece, the Bible, and even early maritime navigation. Mariners also relied on sky colors to anticipate weather changes on the open seas. The ancient Greek poet Hesiod wrote about observing clouds and skies to predict storms, and the Bible's book of Matthew includes the saying about red skies signaling good or bad weather, showing how deeply rooted this observation was. During the Middle Ages, the role of the shepherd was both practical and symbolic. Shepherds were the caretakers of vulnerable life, and their attunement to nature's signs gave them an almost mystical status. Weather knowledge was passed down orally, from generation to generation, encoded in rhymes and sayings that were easy to remember. This oral tradition became a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern meteorology. Even as scientific understanding of weather developed, the proverb retained its place in culture and language because it captured a truth borne out by centuries of experience. Today, while we depend on satellites and supercomputers to forecast storms, the red sky at night remains a poetic and scientifically sound sign of weather to come. The intensity of the red sunset also tells a story about the air quality and the environment. In eras when pollution was lower, the red glow was more vivid and reliable as a weather indicator. During times of volcanic eruptions or dust storms, the sky might turn a deeper or more unusual red, signaling environmental changes that could affect health and agriculture. For shepherds in history, this red sky was a silent sentinel, a daily omen that could mean safety or danger for their flock. It was a visual contract between the earth and sky, a reminder that humanity is always subject to the forces of nature and must learn to read its signs to survive. This ancient proverb, carried through centuries, reminds us of a time when people lived in close dialogue with the natural world, when the sky was not just a backdrop, but a messenger. It tells a story of resilience, observation, and survival, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of uncertainty. So, the next time you see a red sky at night, remember the shepherds who once read its glow as a promise of peace. That fiery sunset is not just beautiful. It's a message from the atmosphere, a glowing thread connecting past to present, science to folklore, nature to human hope. Halo around the moon meant rain within days. A luminous halo surrounding the moon, an ethereal ring of light, has captured human attention for centuries. This delicate, ghostly circle, shimmering in the night sky, was far more than a beautiful spectacle. It was a vital sign, a silent messenger from nature, warning those who observed it of the imminent arrival of rain or storms. Across cultures and eras, people noticed this phenomenon and imbued it with significance that echoed through folklore, agriculture, and early meteorology. To understand why a halo appears around the moon, we must first delve into the science hidden behind this natural event. The moon itself does not emit light, but reflects the sun's rays. When these rays pass through thin, high-altitude cirrostratus clouds, composed of countless tiny ice crystals, they are bent or refracted at a precise angle of 22 degrees. This bending of light causes the moon to appear encircled by a glowing ring, often faint and delicate, sometimes vivid and sharp. The physics behind this optical illusion has fascinated scientists and skywatchers alike, but before the age of scientific instruments, such phenomena were interpreted through the lens of human experience, necessity, and superstition. Historically, the appearance of a lunar halo was closely linked to changes in weather patterns. Cirrostratus clouds often precede frontal weather systems and are the early harbingers of an approaching low-pressure area. Thus, a halo around the moon signaled an incoming shift in the atmosphere, usually heralding rain, storms, or strong winds within the next 24 to 48 hours. Farmers, sailors, and travelers of old observed these signs carefully, relying on them to make crucial decisions that could affect their livelihoods and safety. Ancient texts and folk traditions from around the world bear testimony to the importance of this sign. In Europe, medieval weather lore is filled with rhymes and sayings passed down through generations: halo around the moon, rain or snow soon, or ring around the moon, rain will come soon. These simple yet powerful phrases encapsulate centuries of empirical observation. Such sayings were more than idle superstition. They were distilled wisdom, a primitive form of meteorological forecasting born out of close attention to nature's cues. The Greeks and Romans were among the earliest civilizations to document atmospheric phenomena, linking halos to weather changes. Aristotle's Meteorologica, written in the 4th century BCE, catalogued various weather signs, describing halos as indicators of moisture and impending precipitation. His work laid the foundation for natural philosophy and early scientific thought, emphasizing the importance of observing natural phenomena to understand the world. In agrarian societies, the stakes were particularly high. Knowing when rain was imminent could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and crop failure. Farmers would watch the sky for any indication of weather shifts, and a halo around the moon was a crucial alert. It signaled the need to prepare, whether to protect ripening crops from harsh weather or to plan the planting and harvesting accordingly. This practical knowledge was essential in an age before modern meteorology and reliable weather forecasts. Mariners also placed great trust in these signs. Sailing ships depended heavily on wind and weather conditions. A lunar halo was a warning to secure sails and prepare for turbulent seas. Navigators passed these observations down as part of their lore, integrating celestial phenomena into their survival toolkit. For them, the moon was not just a guide for navigation, but also a prognosticator of danger. Culturally, the halo carried mystical and symbolic weight. Many people saw it as an omen or a message from the divine. In some Native American traditions, the halo was interpreted as a spiritual sign, connecting the earth to the heavens and warning communities to ready themselves. Similarly, in Asian folklore, the moon's halo was associated with supernatural forces influencing weather and fate, entwining natural events with spiritual beliefs. Throughout history, the observation of lunar halos was one among many celestial phenomena used to predict weather. Others included the redness of the moon or sun at sunset and sunrise, the behavior of animals, and changes in wind patterns. The halo's persistence as a reliable sign speaks to the enduring human effort to find order and predictability in the natural world, a precursor to the science of meteorology we rely on today. With the advent of modern meteorology and satellite technology, the scientific understanding of halos has deepened. We now know the exact atmospheric conditions that produce this ring of light, and weather predictions have become far more precise. However, the poetic and practical legacy of the lunar halo remains, a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. In today's world, the halo around the moon is often seen as a beautiful and mysterious celestial display. Yet, for those who look deeper, it still carries its ancient message, nature's quiet warning that change is on the horizon. From the humble farmer in a medieval village to the sophisticated meteorologist monitoring satellite data, the moon's halo continues to remind us of the intimate connection between the sky above and life below. As you gaze upward on a clear night and notice that delicate circle of light, remember that you are witnessing a phenomenon that has guided humanity's understanding of weather for millennia. The halo around the moon is not just a cosmic ornament, but a testament to the enduring human desire to read the signs in the sky, to predict, prepare, and survive in a world governed by the rhythms of nature. The next time a glowing ring encircles the moon, pause and reflect on the deep history and science entwined in that simple yet profound sign. In the silent language of light and ice crystals, the moon speaks, forecasting rain, storms, and the endless dance of Earth's ever-changing weather. This ancient dialogue between the heavens and the earth has been ongoing since time immemorial, connecting all who watch the skies in hope, wonder, and readiness. Cows. Lying down predicted rain. There is something ancient and quietly profound about watching cows lie down in a field. To many, it seems a simple act of rest or comfort. But across centuries, in countless rural villages scattered across the world, this seemingly ordinary behavior became a signal, a weather omen, a whispered message from the natural world forecasting rain. The lore is that when cows lie down in a field, they are not merely resting, they are keeping the grass dry for the inevitable rainfall to come. This belief, though seemingly quaint, rests on a complex intertwining of observation, environment, animal behavior, and human survival instincts that have evolved over millennia. From the earliest days of pastoralism, humans lived in intimate harmony with the rhythms of the land and its creatures. The cycles of rain and drought dictated survival, crop yields, and livestock health. villagers depended on subtle signs to anticipate weather changes before modern meteorology. Animals, more finely attuned to shifts in humidity, pressure, and temperature, acted as natural barometers. Their behavior became a crucial source of predictive knowledge. Among these creatures, cows, with their calm demeanor and constant presence in fields, emerged as particularly reliable indicators. The belief that cows lie down before it rains has roots tracing back to European folk traditions, documented in agricultural manuals and weather lore dating to the Middle Ages and earlier. Shepherds and farmers noticed a pattern. On days preceding rain, cows tended to settle on the ground, often grouped together, seemingly deliberately avoiding grazing. The folk explanation was that cows lay down to protect the grass from moisture, keeping it dry for later consumption. This poetic interpretation anthropomorphizes cows with foresight and purpose, as if they actively prepare for the rain, a notion that resonated with agricultural communities dependent on these rhythms. Scientific inquiry into this phenomenon, conducted much later, offers some support for these observations, though the exact reasons remain debated. One theory centers around atmospheric pressure. Falling pressure typically precedes storms and rain, and it is believed that cows, sensitive to these pressure changes through their respiratory or vestibular systems, respond by lying down to relieve discomfort or stabilize themselves. Another explanation considers humidity and ground moisture levels. Cows may lie down to reduce heat loss from standing on cool, damp ground or because the air feels heavy and wet, signaling approaching rain. While these theories do not conclusively prove cows' behavior predicts rain, they highlight animals' acute sensory adaptations to environmental changes that humans cannot easily perceive. Moreover, this belief reflects a deeper human instinct to read nature as a guide. Before the era of weather stations, satellite data, and Doppler radar, survival often depended on such knowledge. To a villager whose livelihood depended on crops and cattle, a few hours' advance warning of rain could mean the difference between harvesting dry or losing valuable grain to spoilage. Farmers would watch the skies and their animals, interpreting every twitch, every change in posture. The cows lying down was one of these signs, a natural weather app that communicated through behavior rather than data. This lore also intersects with cultural symbolism. Cows have long held sacred or special status in many societies, especially in South Asia. They embody fertility, sustenance, and the earth's bounty. That their behavior would be linked to rain, the essential life-giving element, enhances their symbolic connection to cycles of growth and renewal. The image of cows lying peacefully, anticipating rain, becomes a metaphor for the earth's rhythms and the close relationship between humans, animals, and nature. Historically, this weather lore was recorded and passed through generations in agricultural almanacs, oral traditions, and folk songs. For instance, in English folklore, the saying goes, "When cows lie down, rain is nigh." Similar proverbs appear across Europe and other parts of the world, reflecting a shared human experience with livestock and the environment. These traditions formed an informal but vital meteorological system, guiding planting, harvesting, and livestock management. In more recent times, researchers have studied animal behavior in relation to weather with modern technology. While the results are mixed, the consistent anecdotal evidence from rural communities worldwide supports the enduring belief. In some places, farmers still check their animals before consulting weather forecasts. This blend of empirical observation and cultural wisdom represents an enduring legacy of humanity's connection to nature's subtle cues. To understand why cows lie down before rain is to glimpse the intimate dance of life and environment shaped by thousands of years of coevolution. It reminds us that before machines and algorithms, people looked to the natural world itself for answers. Animals, with their sensitive bodies and instinctive responses, served as living barometers, their behaviors a form of communication between the earth and its human caretakers. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, these ancient signs carry a timeless truth. The quiet image of cows resting in a field, poised on the edge of a coming storm, evokes a deep respect for nature's wisdom. It reminds us that the simplest acts can hold profound meaning. For centuries, the cow's habit of lying down was more than just a routine. It was a vital signal, a weather warning carried in the calm of their repose, a bridge between animal instinct and human survival. This enduring belief, rooted in history, observation, and cultural significance, captures the essence of a world where every creature, every moment, was part of a larger, interconnected web, predicting the future, one weathered day at a time. Swallows flying low meant bad weather. For centuries, before modern meteorology gave us satellites and barometers, people relied on the whispers of nature itself to predict the skies. Among the countless signs etched into folk wisdom, one of the most enduring and evocative was the behavior of swallows, those swift, graceful birds that seemed to dance effortlessly through the air. Villagers and travelers alike watched these small creatures with keen eyes, understanding that their flight patterns were more than mere happenstance. They were messages from the atmosphere, a natural barometer signaling the coming weather. When swallows were seen flying low, skimming just above fields, meadows, and lakes, the elders knew to prepare. This was no ordinary flight. It was a harbinger of change, an omen of an approaching storm or foul weather. The common saying in many rural communities was that the birds were dipping before a storm. But this phrase held a deeper scientific truth that even the earliest observers sensed intuitively, long before formal meteorological science developed. The reason swallows fly low before rain lies in the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure. Swallows are insectivorous birds. They catch their prey mid-air, feeding on flying insects such as flies, mosquitoes, and beetles. These insects, in turn, respond acutely to changes in air pressure. When the pressure falls, as it often does before a storm front, insects descend closer to the ground, seeking shelter from the changing weather. The swallows follow their food, flying lower to hunt. Thus, the bird's flight patterns directly mirror the insect movement, which itself is a natural response to atmospheric shifts. This delicate interplay of animal behavior and weather patterns was not lost on ancient peoples. In fact, numerous agricultural societies depended heavily on such signs to time their planting, harvesting, and preparations for adverse weather. In regions of Europe, from the rolling hills of England to the fertile valleys of France and Italy, farmers would keenly observe the swallow's flight. The birds were silent sentinels, an airborne forecast that helped communities survive the unpredictable whims of nature. Historical records and folklore are replete with references to swallows as weather predictors. The Romans, for instance, noted the flight of swallows and swifts in their rural treatises on agriculture. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, described how changes in bird behavior often preceded weather changes and advised farmers to heed these natural warnings. Across the centuries, this knowledge passed from generation to generation through oral tradition, songs, and proverbs. In medieval Europe, the reliance on birds and other animal behavior to predict weather was part of a broader tapestry of natural observation woven tightly into everyday life. Barley would be planted after the swallows dip low, and villagers would secure their homes and livestock against the storm. The skies might darken, clouds gather, and the wind carry an ominous chill. But the bird's low flight was often the first unmistakable sign. It was a signal that modern science has since confirmed. A falling barometric pressure means moisture-laden air is moving in, increasing the likelihood of rain or storms. What makes this tradition even more compelling is how widespread and consistent it was across cultures, continents, and centuries. In rural Asia, indigenous tribes similarly interpreted the flight of swallows as a weather cue. In Native American lore, birds were considered the eyes of the sky, their movements reflecting the spirit of the weather. Even in ancient China, where scholars meticulously recorded natural phenomena, the behaviors of animals, including birds, were studied as essential indicators of forthcoming weather changes. This primal connection between human survival and animal behavior is a reminder of how deeply intertwined our lives are with the rhythms of the natural world. The swallow's low flight before a storm is not just a quaint superstition, it is a living testament to an era when human knowledge grew from observation, empathy, and an intimate relationship with nature. Today, while we rely on complex instruments, satellite imaging, and real-time data streams, the swallow's warning still holds symbolic power. Birdwatchers and farmers in the countryside may still notice these low flights and recall the old wisdom. The phrase, "swallows dipping low," evokes a timeless image of delicate wings cutting through heavy air, the Earth's oldest meteorologists marking the invisible shift in the atmosphere. But there is a deeper lesson here as well. The behavior of swallows reminds us that nature communicates in many subtle languages, that survival depended on paying attention to these signs, and that the knowledge of ancestors was rooted in precise empirical observation, not just myth. In an age where we have largely distanced ourselves from the natural world, understanding the swallow's low flight before a storm connects us to a lineage of watchers and listeners. Those who knew that the smallest creatures often hold the grandest truths. It is a story of survival, adaptation, and the profound bond between life and weather. So, next time you see a swallow skimming low across the sky, know that you are witnessing an ancient dance, a delicate prelude to the storm, a reminder that nature's signs are never random, but full of meaning, and that even in the swift flutter of a bird's wing, the future can be read. Spiders abandoning their webs. Predicted wind. In the stillness before a storm, when the fields looked calm and the skies offered no warning, there was one sign the old villagers trusted more than any weather vane or church bell. They looked to the corners of barns, hedgerows, and low-hanging branches, and watched the spiders. If the webs had vanished, if the eight-legged weavers were gone, they knew. The wind was coming. Not just a breeze, but a gale. A force that could strip thatched roofs, flatten crops, and scatter livestock into the hills. And it wasn't superstition. This was an observation sharpened across centuries, where nature whispered her warnings not in words, but in patterns. In medieval Europe, when meteorology was yet unborn, and the church taught that storms were the wrath of saints or the devil's howl, peasants clung to the patterns of animals. Spiders were especially sacred in their silent warnings. They spun their webs with meticulous precision, often at night, when the air was calm and still. These webs were fragile yet resilient, able to stretch and hold against gentle breezes, but no match for violent gusts. When a spider sensed a shift in atmospheric pressure, a trembling in the invisible balance of air around them, it did not wait. It would abandon its web or avoid spinning altogether. Entire walls that had been laced with threads would lie bare come morning. And to those who lived by the land, this emptiness was louder than any shout. Chronicles from rural England in the 14th and 15th centuries describe farmers waking before dawn to inspect the hedgerows for webs. It was not idle curiosity. It was survival. A vanishing web meant tools must be secured, shutters locked, carts sheltered, and animals brought in. Crops at risk of being uprooted by the wind were harvested early, sometimes at a loss, just to preserve what could be saved. And while some dismissed these signs as peasant paranoia, the wise took heed. Even certain monasteries, known for their rigid order and skepticism of folk traditions, recorded instances where warnings from spider behavior preceded massive windstorms that uprooted trees and collapsed church towers. In Norse and Slavic traditions, where winds were often personified as spirits or vengeful gods, spiders had an almost prophetic status. One 12th century Icelandic saga mentions a hermit who refused to leave his cave until the silk vanished from stone, believing the spider's absence was the sky's permission to travel. And it wasn't just mythology. By the 1600s, natural philosophers began noting the connection between spider behavior and pressure changes. Though they lacked the instruments to measure barometric drops, they watched and learned. A journal from 1678, written by a Dutch merchant, recounts that on the day before a storm sank half his fleet, the webbed beams of his storehouse had stood oddly bare. Even sailors, notorious for relying on weathered charts and gut feeling, paid attention to the ship's spiders. Webs spun in the corners of the rigging or tucked beneath barrels often disappeared before a sea storm. Some captains considered the spider a more accurate forecaster than the ship's compass. On vessels where rats were tolerated for good luck, spiders were guarded for foresight. But why did spiders respond so clearly, so precisely to wind that had not yet arrived? Modern science, centuries too late to save the thatched roofs of the past, has confirmed that spiders are sensitive to microvibrations and changes in air pressure, the minute disturbances in air density, the subtle tension shifts along the threads of their webs, and even the change in electric charge in the atmosphere can all be sensed by their delicate limbs. When a gale approaches, long before a human feels a breeze, the spider feels the change and acts. There's a deeper, almost poetic resonance to this ancient trust in spiders. At a time when life was unpredictable, when disease, famine, and war could arrive without warning, people learned to see meaning in silence. A vanished web was more than a forecast. It was a message, a sign that nature was preparing for something violent, that the world, for all its beauty, was about to turn. And those who listened were often spared the worst. While others waited for thunder to speak or clouds to gather, the observant had already taken shelter, guided by a creature barely the size of a coin. Even into the 19th century, before modern meteorological stations reached rural Europe, local farmers and shepherds still checked the hedgerows. Schoolboys were taught that a dew-covered web meant calm weather, but a missing web meant wind. And when massive storms swept through northern France and southern England in the 1800s, killing livestock and tearing roofs from homes, old diaries record a common note: the spiders were gone. Today, in a world of satellites and digital forecasts, it's easy to dismiss such lore. But those who've lived close to the land still watch. Gardeners, hikers, and forest wardens, those who pay attention, know the signs. A sudden disappearance of webs in summer, a spider abandoning its corner on a still morning, is rarely meaningless. It's as if the thread between ancient wisdom and modern science still holds, invisible but strong, like silk stretched across time. So, the next time you pass a web, glistening in the morning sun or clinging to a windowsill, pause. If it's there, the world is likely calm. But if it's gone, if the spider has fled and the air feels too still, listen, for you might be standing in the quiet breath before the wind screams, and the spider, small and silent, already knew a sudden silence in the forest was feared. For as long as humans have lived close to nature, the forest has been a place of mystery, life, and subtle signals. Long before modern weather instruments, ancient villagers and travelers learned to read the smallest signs from the natural world around them, signs that could mean the difference between safety and disaster. One of the most haunting and deeply rooted warnings came from an eerie silence that would suddenly fall over the forest, when birds stopped singing and insects ceased their buzzing all at once. This abrupt stillness was not mere coincidence. It was a sign that the sky itself was holding its breath, a harbinger of an approaching storm or other calamity. In agrarian and hunter-gatherer societies, the forest was not just a backdrop. It was a living, breathing ecosystem that provided food, shelter, and protection. The daily chorus of birdsong and insect hum was a soundtrack of life and abundance. These sounds were so constant and familiar that their sudden absence was unsettling. When that silence came, it spoke louder than words, striking a primal chord of fear and caution. Historical records from Europe to Asia show how deeply this observation was woven into folklore and survival strategies. Villagers would say that the sky holds its breath at these moments of stillness, an evocative metaphor that captured the tension between the earth and the heavens. The silence was interpreted as the natural world bracing itself, warning humans that a storm, heavy rain, or even worse, such as a violent tempest or a deadly thunderstorm, was imminent. Why did this happen? The answer lies in how animals react to changes in atmospheric pressure and environmental cues preceding storms. Birds and insects are highly sensitive to barometric pressure drops. When a storm approaches, the air pressure falls rapidly, and animals instinctively become quiet or seek shelter to avoid danger. The forest's vibrant symphony abruptly fades, as if the entire ecosystem is signaling a warning. For villagers who depended on farming and gathering, such silence was crucial knowledge. Storms could devastate crops, flood fields, and destroy homes. Being able to sense the arrival of bad weather without instruments was essential for taking precautions. Harvests could be saved by hastily securing grain or livestock sheltered before the storm hit. The sudden silence was a natural alarm system, passed down as wisdom through generations. This phenomenon also held spiritual significance. In many cultures, silence in nature was linked with the supernatural or divine intervention. Some believed that spirits or gods were pausing to observe, or that the forest itself was mourning or bracing for upheaval. These beliefs added layers of meaning and reinforced the importance of heeding nature's warnings. In medieval Europe, chroniclers and naturalists wrote about these signs in manuscripts and herbals, blending observation with superstition. The sudden quiet was seen as one of many omens, alongside changes in wind, cloud formations, or animal behavior that foretold the weather. Shepherds, hunters, and farmers all attuned their lives to such cues, developing a complex system of natural forecasting that rivaled early scientific attempts at weather prediction. Even today, the sudden silence of birds and insects before a storm remains a powerful reminder of our connection to nature's rhythms. While modern meteorology can predict storms with extraordinary accuracy, this age-old signal continues to resonate deeply within us. It speaks to a time when humans lived in closer harmony with the environment, reading the skies and forests, not with instruments, but with attuned senses and respect. This silence is not just a meteorological event. It is a profound experience that touches on our primal instincts, reminding us of the delicate balance between calm and chaos, life and survival. It is a moment suspended in time when the world seems to pause, holding its breath before the storm's roar. So, next time you find yourself in a forest and the birds and insects suddenly fall silent, remember that this ancient signal carries the voice of countless generations who learned to listen. the sky is holding its breath, and so should you. If the smoke fell, rain was coming. If you stood by a village hearth centuries ago, the way smoke behaved from the chimney was more than just a curious observation. It was a vital signal, a weather forecast whispered by nature itself. When the smoke refused to rise and instead drifted low, clinging close to the earth, people knew to prepare for rain. This simple, everyday phenomenon held a wealth of meaning long before modern meteorology explained the complex interplay of atmospheric physics. To grasp why smoke behaves this way, we must first understand the dynamics of air and moisture. On the dry, clear days, warm air near the ground rises freely, carrying smoke upward in lazy spirals or straight columns. But when the air is saturated with moisture, when humidity climbs and the atmosphere becomes heavy, this upward movement is stifled. The smoke encounters denser, cooler air layers and is forced to spread sideways, hugging the ground in a low, creeping dance. This visible change is an early warning, a natural barometer signaling that rain or storms are likely approaching. Ancient societies across the world recognized and revered this sign. For centuries, farmers, fishermen, and travelers relied on such natural cues to plan their days, their harvests, and their journeys. Before weather stations and satellites, this earthly language of smoke and sky was crucial for survival. Historical records and folk wisdom abound with references to this phenomenon. In Europe, proverbs like, "When smoke falls low, the rain will flow," or "Smoke that stays low means water will flow," were commonly recited, passed from generation to generation as distilled weather wisdom. In the rural villages of England and France, chimney smoke was watched as vigilantly as the clouds themselves. People observed how it moved, judged the air's mood, and prepared accordingly. The physics behind this is rooted in the atmosphere's stability. On humid days, a temperature inversion may form, a layer of warm air resting above cooler air near the surface. This inversion traps moisture and pollutants, including smoke, close to the ground. The chimney smoke, unable to rise through this stable layer, becomes an unmistakable sign of this atmospheric condition. Such inversions often precede fronts and weather systems that bring precipitation. This knowledge was not limited to Europe. Indigenous peoples around the world used similar observations, incorporating the behavior of smoke into their rich tapestry of environmental understanding. Native American tribes, for example, read smoke signals not only as communication, but also as weather indicators. When the smoke of campfires hovered low and thick, it foretold coming rain or storms, a vital insight for hunting and travel. In Asia, traditional farming communities held similar beliefs. Farmers would look to the village chimneys, observing the smoke's dance against the backdrop of an approaching monsoon or typhoon. Such observations helped them anticipate the rain's arrival, ensuring timely sowing or harvesting. Mariners also found the behavior of smoke invaluable. Near coastal villages, sailors and fishermen would watch the smoke from coastal hearths or signal fires, using it to predict shifts in wind and weather. A low-hanging smoke plume could mean a coming storm, prompting them to secure boats and prepare for rough seas. The humble chimney smoke thus became an early, accessible weather gauge, a bridge between the natural world and human activity. This wisdom, born from patient observation and survival necessity, laid the groundwork for the science of meteorology. It reflects humanity's enduring quest to decode the sky's signals, to read the subtle messages written in smoke, wind, and clouds. With the rise of modern weather forecasting, we now understand the atmospheric mechanics behind these signs, but the ancient practice of reading chimney smoke endures as a poetic reminder of our connection to nature's rhythms. Even today, When smoke clings close to the earth instead of rising, it still tells the story of moisture gathering, the air thickening, and rain on its way. So, next time you see smoke pooling low by a chimney, think of the generations who depended on that quiet sign. Behind the swirling tendrils lies a history of human resilience and a timeless dance between earth, air, and water. An elemental conversation as old as civilization itself. The smoke falling low is not just a signal for rain. It's a testament to humanity's enduring relationship with the skies above and the weather that shapes our lives. Rain, before 7, meant sunshine by 11. Long before modern weather forecasts and digital alerts, farmers relied on time-tested proverbs to read the sky and plan their work. One such proverb, simple yet remarkably effective, was, "Rain before 7 meant sunshine by 11." This saying guided generations in deciding whether to pause their fieldwork or press on, risking the delicate timing of planting seeds and tending crops. At first glance, it may seem like mere folk wisdom, but beneath its brevity lies a deep understanding of weather patterns shaped by centuries of observation, survival, and intimate connection to the land. In agrarian societies, timing was everything. A sudden rainstorm could soak newly sown seeds, damage delicate plants, or delay harvests. Conversely, a brief shower early in the morning, followed by sunshine, could replenish moisture in the soil and create ideal conditions for growth. For farmers, the difference between rain at dawn and rain later in the day could mean prosperity or loss. This proverb distilled a crucial weather truth into a handy mnemonic. If rain came before 7 o'clock in the morning, it was likely a passing shower that would clear by mid-morning, making it safe to resume outdoor work. But rain after 7 was often a sign of prolonged wet weather, signaling the need to delay planting or harvesting. This practical wisdom has roots in the climatic and atmospheric behavior typical of many temperate regions. Morning rain frequently results from overnight cooling that causes dew or light showers, which dissipate as the sun rises and warms the air. When rain falls early and stops quickly, the atmosphere stabilizes, and farmers could expect clear skies by 11. On the other hand, rainfall beginning later in the morning often indicates a developing weather front or sustained low-pressure system, bringing extended wet conditions. Understanding these subtle temporal patterns gave rural communities a strategic advantage in managing crops and labor. Historically, such proverbs were not merely passed down casually, but embedded within a rich tradition of weather lore documented in almanacs, farming manuals, and oral storytelling. In societies where every hour counted, these sayings were crucial survival tools. They were part of a shared cultural knowledge that combined natural signs, animal behavior, and human experience into reliable guidance. Farmers, shepherds, and field workers listened closely to these signs, integrating them into daily decisions. The proverb, "Rain before 7 meant sunshine by 11, exemplifies how language served as a bridge between observation and action, turning complex meteorological phenomena into memorable, actionable advice. The proverb also reveals a remarkable interplay between nature's rhythms and human perception of time. Before the widespread use of clocks, measuring time by the position of the sun or simple devices like water clocks was common. Associating rain events with specific times required an attentive eye and a communal understanding of daily routines. This relationship between weather and time reflects how agricultural communities structured their lives around natural cycles, not just calendars, but hourly progressions of the day. Furthermore, the phrase carries an implicit optimism and hope. It reassures that rain, often feared for its destructive potential, can also be temporary and followed by clear skies. This hopeful outlook likely helped maintain morale during unpredictable seasons, encouraging farmers to persevere despite nature's uncertainties. The wisdom embedded in this saying connects deeply with the human experience of waiting and watching, learning patience through the sky's changing moods. Scientific studies in meteorology today explain these patterns with modern terminology: temperature inversions, pressure systems, diurnal cycles. But the lived experience of past generations distilled them into this proverb. It represents the fusion of empirical knowledge and cultural storytelling, showing how humans historically adapted to environmental challenges. Even now, in many rural areas around the world, such traditional sayings still resonate, a testament to their enduring relevance. In a broader sense, rain before 7 meant sunshine by 11 is a symbol of humanity's timeless relationship with nature. It reflects how ancient wisdom, born from attentive observation and necessity, formed the foundation of agricultural success. This saying reminds us that before satellites and sensors, humans looked to the sky, to the rain, and to the passing hours, finding patterns that helped them thrive. For modern listeners, this proverb offers a glimpse into a world where every raindrop's timing was meaningful, where weather was not a distant forecast, but an immediate, lived reality. It invites us to appreciate the subtle knowledge embedded in folk sayings and to remember that sometimes the simplest words carry the deepest truths. The next time rain falls early in the morning, perhaps we can pause and hear the echoes of those ancient farmers, watching the skies and trusting that sunshine will soon follow. Toads on the path meant damp days ahead. Long before the age of satellites and precise weather forecasts, our ancestors looked to the natural world for guidance and warnings. In the quiet corners of forests, fields, and villages, the creatures of the earth spoke in subtle signals, signs that could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and ruin. Among these, one of the most curious and widely observed was the sudden appearance of toads on footpaths and roads. When toads emerged en masse, especially from their damp hiding places, it was an unmistakable omen. Damp days were approaching, bringing rain and wet weather soon to follow. This phenomenon, recorded in folklore across many cultures, was not mere superstition, but an ancient lived knowledge grounded in the behavior of amphibians intimately connected to their environment. Toads, unlike many creatures, are highly sensitive to changes in humidity and barometric pressure, reacting quickly to the subtle shifts that precede storms and prolonged wet spells. When heavy rains were imminent, toads would leave their burrows or the moist earth where they lay hidden and venture onto the paths and open grounds, seeking higher or drier areas or searching for mates stimulated by the moist conditions. To the keen eyes of villagers and travelers centuries ago, these movements were unmistakable signs etched into the rhythm of nature. Toads, those squat, bumpy amphibians often overlooked or even feared, were the heralds of weather change. Their presence in unusual numbers on the beaten tracks or roadways was watched carefully. An early natural forecast, warning of rain that would soak the land, soften the earth, and swell the rivers. Historical accounts from Europe, especially in rural England and France, contain numerous references to toads and frogs as barometers of impending weather. These amphibians were tied to water and dampness so closely that their activity served as an indicator of moisture in the air. The saying, "Toads on the path mean wet days to come," became a practical guide for farmers, shepherds, and woodsmen who would adjust their work accordingly, securing crops, delaying travel, or preparing homes for the wet and chill. This folk wisdom was recorded and passed down through generations in countless rural communities. Medieval agrarian calendars sometimes noted the seasonal movements of amphibians, correlating their emergence with weather patterns vital for planting and harvest cycles. The naturalist observations of the time, although not framed in modern scientific terms, were remarkably accurate. Writers like Thomas Tusser, the 16th century English poet and farmer, hinted at the behaviors of toads and frogs as natural signs alongside other weather lore. In many cultures beyond Europe, amphibians held symbolic and practical significance tied to the elements. In parts of Asia, indigenous communities observed the movements of toads as part of their broader environmental knowledge, often linking them to the life-giving rains that nourished crops and forests. Even ancient Chinese scholars cataloged animal behavior, including that of amphibians, as indicators of seasonal changes and weather shifts. Scientifically, we now understand that amphibians possess highly permeable skin, making them extremely sensitive to humidity and air pressure. As storms approach, the drop in barometric pressure triggers behavioral changes. Toads become more active, often leaving their usual shelters to seek mates during favorable moist conditions, leading to the mass migrations observed by our ancestors. The timing of these movements aligns closely with the onset of wet weather, making the toad's path crossing a natural barometer that predates modern instruments. Yet, the significance of toads on paths goes beyond simple meteorology. These amphibians, long entwined with folklore and mythology, often represented fertility, transformation, and the mysterious forces of the earth. Their sudden appearance was sometimes met with awe or superstition, seen as magical portents or signs from the unseen world. In some cultures, toads were thought to carry the essence of the rain itself, or to act as guardians of the water, bridging the realms of land and moisture. The profound connection between humans and the toad's behavior is a testament to a time when survival depended on listening deeply to nature's rhythms. It was a relationship based on observation, respect, and an intuitive understanding of the environment. Villagers did not merely watch the skies. They watched the ground beneath their feet, the small creatures that moved through it, and the subtle changes in behavior that foretold the coming days. Today, although we have weather apps and satellites, the toad's ancient warning still holds poetic and practical meaning. In many countryside areas, the sight of a gathering of toads on a pathway continues to signal approaching wet weather, a living echo of the natural world's communication with humanity. It invites us to reconnect with the primal knowledge that once guided our ancestors, a knowledge that teaches patience, attentiveness, and harmony with the cycles of earth and sky. Next time you encounter toads crossing a path or filling a meadow after rainfall, remember that you are witnessing a centuries-old dialogue, a natural chorus that has warned humanity of damp days ahead, whispered softly by the earth's quietest weather heralds. Clouds moving fast, but soundless meant a change. In the days before satellites, barometers, or even paper maps, the sky itself was a living scroll, read daily by shepherds, fishermen, and farmers whose survival depended on its messages. Among all the signs they watched for, one was deeply unsettling: clouds that moved swiftly, almost urgently, but made no sound. There was no rustle of leaves, no stir of grass, no whisper through the thatch. Just motion, distant and ghost-like, far above. When this happened, villagers would pause, eyes narrowed toward the sky. They believed it meant change, cold, pressure shifts, and often trouble. And they weren't wrong. This observation passed quietly through generations, carved not into stone, but into memory. Fast-moving clouds without earthly wind were a signal. In many old European hamlets, the elders would point upward and say, "The wind runs in heaven, but the earth has not heard it yet." It meant the upper atmosphere was in flux, and that the stillness on the ground was a false peace. The change would come, soon, and suddenly. From the Scottish Highlands to the vineyards of the Loire Valley, such sky-watching was not poetic fancy, but ritual practice. Medieval farmers knew that clouds sweeping soundlessly from the west often ushered in cold fronts. This wasn't mere superstition. It was a careful reading of contrast. Fast clouds meant high winds aloft. But when the trees below were still, something was wrong in the balance between layers. It signaled instability in the air pressure, a wedge of cold air pushing beneath a warmer mass. Those who understood this would act quickly. Livestock were herded toward shelter, tools brought inside, fires checked, and food stored. Because the silence wouldn't last. Historians have uncovered 14th and 15th century accounts from abbey records and ploughmen's diaries noting this exact sign. One such entry from Yorkshire in 1373 reads, "Clouds ran fast like horses, but our fields stood silent. By nightfall, ice did come." Another from an Italian hillside town recorded in 1419 warns, "The wind ran aloft, unseen and unheard. The next day, the frost killed half the vines." These were not isolated moments. The pattern repeated across climates and cultures. Fast clouds, silent ground, sharp weather change. To the medieval mind, such a sign was both natural and divine. The skies belonged to God. So when the heavens stirred without the earth responding, it was a form of celestial whispering. Some saw it as an omen, others as a test. Cold was not merely inconvenient, it could be deadly. A sudden frost could destroy grain stores, freeze water supplies, kill off weak livestock, or leave families shivering in homes with no insulation but straw and wool. The villagers feared this silence of the sky, not because it roared, but because it didn't. From a modern scientific view, what they were witnessing aligns with what we now call upper-level jet streams and frontal boundaries. When warm, moist air is trapped beneath rapidly advancing cold air at high altitudes, clouds can move quickly, even while the lower air remains eerily still. The quietness below is caused by a lack of turbulence near the surface, often just before a front breaks through. That break comes fast, like a blade of cold sliding across a table. To ancient people with no instruments to measure such changes, the sky's silent hurry was their only clue. Sailors, too, respected this sign. In logbooks from the age of exploration, captains wrote of fast cloud movement above glassy seas, followed by squalls or temperature drops hours later. A Portuguese navigator in 1507 noted, "No wind touched our sails, but the heavens fled from the west." That night, the sea rose. Some called it the ghost wind, for it came without breath, yet bore the power to chill bones and churn the earth. In some folk traditions, particularly in Celtic and Slavic regions, these fast, soundless clouds were described as messengers of the old gods, heralds of a shift not just in temperature, but in mood. They meant that the land was about to feel the sky's decision. Weather was not random. It was memory. The clouds remembered something the people had not yet been told, and those who ignored the signs did so at their peril. Children were taught to watch the sky, not for color alone, but for movement and contrast. A crimson sunset might bring delight, but clouds racing silently overhead in midday stirred caution. Stories passed around hearth fires told of winters that began with such silence, and deaths that followed in its wake. A fast cloud was not beautiful. It was a warning dressed in elegance. Even as the centuries turned and instruments began to enter the homes of the curious, many still believed in this simple truth. If the clouds move like they're chasing time, but your world remains still, brace yourself. Because the change has already begun. You just haven't felt it yet. In a modern world of forecast apps and push notifications, we often miss these subtle signs. But the sky still tells the truth to those who listen. So next time you see the clouds gliding swiftly above still trees, pause. Ask yourself, what are they fleeing? What are they warning? For that ancient voice still speaks, soundless, fast, and cold. And once you've heard it, you'll never look up the same way again. A ring around the sun was dreaded. For centuries, people gazing skyward have been captivated and unnerved by the mysterious appearance of a glowing ring encircling the sun. This ethereal halo, often called a sun halo, has woven itself into folklore, superstition, and ancient weather lore. To the people of old, it was no mere optical curiosity. It was a powerful omen, a warning sign that something ominous was brewing in the skies above. Long before the science of meteorology, the natural world was humanity's earliest weather forecast. Farmers, sailors, and villagers learned to interpret celestial phenomena as messages from nature or the divine. The sudden appearance of a bright, shimmering ring around the sun was one such message, deeply feared and carefully observed. Across cultures, this halo was associated with approaching storms, fierce winds, and even the devastating arrival of hail or thunder. What caused this ring, and why did it carry such dread? The answer lies in the complex interplay of sunlight and atmospheric ice crystals. When sunlight passes through thin, high-altitude cirrus clouds composed of tiny hexagonal ice crystals, it refracts, bending the light to create a luminous ring roughly 22 degrees from the sun. This halo is a spectacular natural light show, but its presence signals the advance of moisture-rich clouds that often precede frontal weather systems. For agrarian societies whose survival depended on clear skies or timely rains, the sun halo was an unmissable sign. It foretold that the atmosphere was shifting, that storms might soon sweep in, bringing fierce winds, heavy rain, or even destructive hailstones. Villagers and shepherds would brace themselves, securing crops, sheltering animals, and preparing homes for the impending weather. Historically, the sun halo has appeared in countless tales and ancient texts. Medieval chroniclers described it with awe and apprehension, often linking its appearance to divine wrath or impending judgment. The halo was sometimes seen as a celestial crown worn by the sun, signaling both its power and its threat. Priests and seers might interpret it as a call to prayer or penance, a reminder that the natural world was controlled by forces beyond human control. In maritime culture, the halo carried similar portent. Sailors, relying on the sky for navigation and weather prediction, took the ring as a sign of changing weather conditions, often preparing for rough seas and sudden squalls. Ancient navigators knew that ignoring such signs could mean disaster. The dread surrounding the sun halo was not unfounded. Weather systems bringing cirrus clouds often heralded significant shifts in atmospheric pressure. Storm fronts frequently followed, bringing thunder, lightning, or hail that could devastate crops and property. For communities living close to the land and reliant on seasonal rhythms, this celestial ring was a critical cue, etched into collective memory as both awe-inspiring and ominous. Today, with our advanced understanding of meteorology, we know the scientific mechanics behind the sun halo. Yet this stunning optical phenomenon still commands respect and wonder. It connects us to our ancestors, who read the sky not through instruments, but through observation, intuition, and an intimate bond with nature. When you see a halo encircling the sun, remember the generations who looked up in both fear and reverence. They saw not just light, but a warning, a circle of warning etched by nature itself, glowing bright with promises of change and the unpredictable power of the weather. The north wind carried cold. A cold, sharp wind blowing from the north has long been nature's unmistakable herald of winter's approach. Known through ages and across cultures as the white breath, this biting northern wind carried with it the threat of frost and snow, a warning that shaped the rhythms of life, especially for agrarian communities whose survival depended on heeding the elements. The arrival of this cold blast was a decisive moment, signaling that the growing season was ending and the harsh months ahead were fast approaching. The source of this chilling wind lies in the vast, icy regions of the Arctic and northern continents. When high-pressure cold air masses build up over these frozen lands, they push southward, sweeping across the landscape with a penetrating chill. This movement of cold air creates what meteorologists now call the north wind, a phenomenon intimately tied to the changing seasons and the onset of winter weather. For farmers of the past, this wind was more than a mere atmospheric event. It was a vital signal demanding immediate action. As the north wind began to howl, they would hasten to gather their tools, harvest the last crops, and secure their homes and livestock. The phrase, "when the white breath blew," encapsulates this urgency, a poetic nod to the wind's frost-laden touch that could destroy unharvested fields and unprotected equipment. Historical records and folklore across Europe, Asia, and North America consistently reflect the significance of the north wind. In medieval Europe, farmers recited weather lore such as "north wind strong, winter's coming long," emphasizing how this wind presaged the coldest, snow-filled months. These sayings were not mere superstition. They were distilled wisdom from generations who understood the wind's role in heralding frost that could ruin crops overnight. The cultural impact of the north wind extended beyond farming. It was often personified and woven into myth and legend. Ancient Greeks envisioned Boreas, the god of the north wind, as a fierce and powerful figure whose breath brought winter's chill. Stories from Norse mythology similarly depicted the cold northern winds as forces shaping the fate of gods and men alike, reinforcing the deep human connection to these natural patterns. The science behind this wind's chilling effect is tied to atmospheric pressure systems and temperature gradients. When a cold, dense air mass pushes southward, it displaces warmer air, causing temperatures to drop sharply. The north wind often brings dry, frigid conditions, but it can also carry moisture that crystallizes into frost or snow, blanketing the earth in white. Farmers' practices evolved around this knowledge. They developed seasonal rituals and schedules, marking the wind's arrival as the signal to complete harvests and prepare for winter's scarcity. Tools were cleaned and stored, fields were cleared, and livestock sheltered, all in anticipation of the white breath's bite. Failure to heed these signs could mean devastation from frozen crops and ruined equipment. Sailors and travelers, too, learned to respect the north wind's power. A sudden drop in temperature, accompanied by a fierce northern gale, could make seas rough and travel dangerous. Coastal communities monitored the wind's direction closely, understanding that its arrival meant more than cold. It could herald storms and shifting weather patterns. In many cultures, the north wind symbolized both destruction and renewal. While it brought hardship, frost, and snow, it also set the stage for rest and regeneration. The cold months forced the earth into dormancy, a necessary pause before the rebirth of spring. This cyclical understanding was embedded in seasonal festivals, agricultural calendars, and spiritual practices. With the advent of meteorology, we now precisely track cold fronts and air masses responsible for the north wind. Yet the ancient observations remain valid. When a biting wind sweeps from the north, it almost always signals frost or snow is near. The enduring legacy of this knowledge continues to influence how communities prepare for winter, blending science with time-honored tradition. So when you feel that sharp, cold gust from the north, remember the generations who read this wind as a messenger, one that carried the promise of winter's grasp and the need to ready the earth and its caretakers. The white breath blowing is more than a meteorological event. It is a thread woven through history, culture, and survival, reminding us of our enduring bond with the seasons and the winds that shape our world. Dew on the grass meant a clear day. Long before the convenience of weather apps and satellite imagery, farmers, sailors, and villagers alike relied on the intimate signs of nature to predict the day ahead. One such time-honored sign was the dew on the grass at dawn. The simple presence of moisture beads glistening on morning blades carried with it a powerful message. A clear day was likely to follow. This ancient wisdom, passed through generations, was more than mere superstition. It was a practical observation grounded in the fundamental principles of meteorology, ecology, and human survival. Dew forms when moisture in the air condenses onto cool surfaces overnight, and the amount of dew is intricately linked to cloud cover during the night. When skies are clear after sunset, the Earth radiates heat into space, causing the surface to cool quickly. This drop in temperature allows water vapor in the air to condense, settling on grass and plants as dew. Conversely, when nights are cloudy, the clouds act like a blanket, trapping heat and keeping the surface warmer. In such conditions, dew formation is minimal or absent. Thus, seeing dew on the grass at dawn meant the night had been clear, signaling stable atmospheric conditions favorable for a clear day ahead. This understanding formed a crucial part of traditional weather lore, especially in agrarian societies dependent on the timing of rain and sunshine for crop success. Dew on the grass was a natural, visible cue that farmers used to plan their day's work, whether to sow seeds, harvest, or move livestock. It also held significance for travelers and fishermen who needed to anticipate weather changes to ensure safety. The presence of dew was a reassuring sign, a silent confirmation from the natural world that conditions were calm and favorable. Historical records reveal how this knowledge was woven into the fabric of everyday life. In European folklore, rhymes and sayings encapsulated the dew's message like, "Dew on the grass, clear skies will pass." Similarly, Native American tribes and other indigenous cultures observed dew patterns as part of their sophisticated environmental knowledge systems. These communities often combined dew observations with other natural indicators, such as bird behavior, wind direction, and cloud formations, to create comprehensive weather predictions rooted in lived experience and acute environmental awareness. The science behind dew formation also highlights the subtle interplay between land, air, and water that sustains ecosystems. Dew not only signaled weather, but also played a vital role in providing moisture to plants and small creatures during dry periods. In arid and semi-arid regions, dew could be a crucial water source, sustaining life where rainfall was scarce. Recognizing this, humans learned to value dew not only as a weather predictor, but as an essential part of the natural cycle. This belief in dew as a harbinger of clear skies also underscores humanity's timeless fascination with reading nature's signs. Before the industrial age, when technology was scarce, survival depended on attentiveness to the environment's nuances. The sight of dew-covered grass was a daily message from the earth, a subtle communication that guided decision-making and fostered harmony between humans and nature. In a cultural context, dew carries symbolic meanings as well. It evokes freshness, purity, and renewal. The soft, glistening drops that appear with the dawn symbolize new beginnings. For poets and philosophers alike, dew represents the delicate balance of life, the fleeting moments of clarity before the day unfolds. This poetic dimension adds depth to the practical knowledge embedded in the proverb, reflecting how human beings have always blended observation with meaning. Modern meteorology explains dew formation in terms of relative humidity, temperature, and radiation cooling, but the essence remains unchanged. The presence of dew still indicates clear nights and a likelihood of good weather, confirming the wisdom of ancient observers. Even today, in many farming communities around the world, checking the grass for dew remains a trusted practice, bridging past and present. This simple natural phenomenon reminds us that profound truths often lie in the quietest details. The dew on the grass is not just moisture, it is a signal, a natural forecast written in tiny droplets, carrying centuries of human connection to the sky and earth. It invites us to slow down, observe closely, and appreciate the delicate dialogues happening around us. So next time you rise early and notice dew shimmering on the grass, remember you are witnessing a timeless weather oracle. That glistening moisture is nature's way of telling you that the skies are clear and the day ahead holds promise, a quiet assurance from the night before that the sun will shine and life will go on, just as it has for countless generations. Frogs singing at dusk meant a wet night, long before the rise of modern meteorology, when humanity's understanding of weather was woven from the fabric of observation and nature's subtle signals. The world spoke in sounds as much as in sights. Among the most haunting and evocative of these natural voices was the evening chorus of frogs at dusk. To ancient farmers, wanderers, and village folk, the rising song of frogs as twilight descended was never merely a serenade. It was a natural alarm, a weather forecast whispered through the night's first chorus, warning that a sudden downpour awaited after sundown. This belief, widespread across continents and cultures, echoes an intimate knowledge of amphibian behavior tied intricately to atmospheric changes. The frog's call at dusk, a collective croaking that swelled across ponds, marshes, and riverbanks, was more than a mating ritual or a simple instinct. It was a natural response triggered by rising humidity and falling barometric pressure, the precursors of rain. For countless generations, rural communities depended heavily on these natural signals. Before the invention of instruments, before the convenience of radios or smartphones, survival hinged on understanding the language of nature itself. Frogs, with their haunting evening songs, became living barometers, their chorus rising and falling in direct conversation with the skies. Ancient texts and oral traditions from Europe reveal this deep-rooted connection. In medieval England, the sounds of frogs singing at dusk were noted by farmers as an unmistakable sign. A wet night was imminent. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, described the behavior of amphibians as being closely tied to weather changes, emphasizing their sensitivity to the air's moisture content. Such observations were embedded into folk wisdom, repeated in proverbs, and passed down like precious cargo through the centuries. Across the globe, similar patterns emerge. Indigenous peoples in North America regarded the frog's evening calls as nature's weather alerts, a sign that the night would bring rain. In parts of Asia and Africa, frog choruses at twilight were recorded in folklore as the heralds of monsoon rains and seasonal storms. This universality speaks to an enduring biological truth and an ancient human respect for the natural rhythms that govern life. Scientifically, the explanation lies in amphibians' physiology and behavior. Frogs rely heavily on moisture for survival and reproduction. Their permeable skin makes them highly sensitive to humidity and temperature changes. As evening approaches and moisture begins to rise in the atmosphere, signaling an incoming storm, the frogs respond instinctively, intensifying their calls to attract mates and stake territory in the increasingly favorable wet conditions. Moreover, the drop in barometric pressure that often precedes rainfall influences frog activity. The diminishing pressure acts as a trigger, stimulating the amphibians to increase vocalization. The louder and more persistent the chorus, the more certain the impending wet weather. The timing of their calls at dusk is particularly significant, as this is when atmospheric conditions stabilize after the heat of the day, and weather fronts often begin to move in. But the frog's song is not just a scientific indicator. It has also permeated human culture, inspiring stories, myths, and symbolic meanings. In many traditions, frogs represent transformation, fertility, and renewal, making their chorus at dusk not only a weather sign, but a symbol of the Earth's ongoing cycles. The sudden onset of rain following their song was often seen as a blessing, a promise of nourishment for crops and life-giving water for animals and people. In some rural communities, the soundscape of frogs at twilight held a sacred quality. Elders would listen closely, interpreting the intensity and tone of the chorus to predict the timing and severity of the rain. Children learned to recognize the patterns, the crescendo of calls signaling not just a wet night, but sometimes storms fierce enough to flood fields or delay harvests. These auditory cues were woven tightly into the agricultural calendar, influencing decisions that affected entire villages. Today, despite the advance of technology, the frog's dusk chorus remains a living connection to that ancestral wisdom. In countryside ponds and wetlands, when the sun dips below the horizon and the first croaks rise in chorus, one can almost hear the echoes of centuries of watchers who learned to read these sounds as weather warnings. It is a moment when nature and human experience converge, a fleeting, powerful reminder that the rhythms of life and weather remain deeply intertwined. So, the next time you hear frogs singing at dusk, consider the legacy carried in their calls. You are listening to a natural orchestra that has foretold rain for millennia, a chorus shaped by evolution and human survival. It is a voice from the past, a messenger of wet nights and nourishing storms, and a testament to the subtle, profound ways that nature communicates its secrets. Sun dogs meant strange days. Ahead. In the cold stillness of dawn or the fading gold of late afternoon, villagers sometimes looked skyward and froze, not because of beauty, but because of fear. There, beside the sun, hung two ghostly orbs of light, bright as stars but wrong in their position. They flanked the sun like watchful sentinels, forming a trio that no one trusted. These were sun dogs, called phantom suns by those who lived centuries before the term was tamed by science. To the medieval mind, they were not optical illusions. They were warnings. Strange days were coming. The wind would turn wrong. The season would misbehave. Something in the natural order had fractured, and the sky was the first to confess it. Long before lenses or prisms explained the phenomenon, sundogs were recorded across Europe with fear and reverence. Formed by the refraction of sunlight through ice crystals suspended high in the atmosphere, they appear when the sky is frigid, the sun is low, and the upper winds have begun to shift. To modern science, this creates a 22-degree halo with bright spots, mock suns, on either side. But to the villagers watching from the frozen fields, they meant something was off, not just in the weather, but in the world itself. Chronicles from the 9th to 16th centuries speak of sundogs appearing before great upheavals, harsh winters, sudden famines, or even war. In the Annales Cambriae, a Welsh record from the early medieval period, a phantom sun was noted just days before the River Wye froze solid and livestock perished by the thousands. In Saxony, a parchment dated 1412 tells of 3 suns above the village, seen by all, under a sky without warmth. The ground did not thaw until late spring. Villagers came to believe these lights were more than signs. They were omens, the heavens displaying imbalance before the earth could follow suit. Some clergy considered them divine heralds. Others whispered that they were eyes of forgotten gods or watchers from realms beyond the sky. But no matter the interpretation, the response was always the same: unease. Tools were gathered, fires fed, animals brought in close. If a sundog appeared in summer, it was believed the harvest would be late or blighted. If it came in winter, death would ride on the wind. In some corners of Eastern Europe, the arrival of sundogs was called the splitting of the sun, a sign that time itself might split with it. Elders told of years where the weather never settled, where frost came in spring and thunder in December. The seasons blurred, and with them, the structure of life. When planting could no longer be predicted, when food could not be timed, the entire rhythm of village life began to fray. There were even recorded instances of people falling to their knees when sundogs appeared, thinking they were witnessing the beginning of judgment. A traveler in 1527 passing through a small Austrian town noted in his journal that the villagers ceased all work and prayed aloud in the fields. 3 suns had been seen above the monastery, and the wind turned bitter at once. The monks rang their bells not to mark time, but to drive away what they feared was approaching. What terrified people most was that sundogs came with stillness. No thunder, no rain, no wind at first. Just light, strange and pale, bending into forms it should not take. The air felt fragile, and then, without fail, the weather would betray them. Frost would fall where it should not. Winds would veer from their patterns. Birds would migrate wrongly. Crops would bloom early and die too soon. The sundogs didn't cause this. They revealed it. They were the sky's confession, written in light. Even seafarers believed in their omen. Ships anchored in northern harbors were known to delay departure when sundogs were seen on the horizon, for sailors believed the sea would not behave naturally afterward, and often they were right. Shifting winds and rogue waves were common in the days that followed. Modern meteorology now recognizes that sundogs often accompany the leading edge of a change in weather. The high cirrus clouds that create them are often part of a frontal boundary, meaning that within a day or two, wind, pressure, and temperature are likely to shift. But to the eyes of history, none of this needed explanation. They already knew that when the sky doubled its own light, it was telling a secret, and it was not a happy one. In Norse myth, there is a tale of 3 suns appearing in the sky before the long winter of Fimbulvetur, the endless cold that would precede Ragnarok. Whether coincidence or memory wrapped in myth, the parallel lingers. A sun that shares its place in the sky is no longer sovereign. Something is off balance. The world, though it spins, begins to falter. Even today, those who spend their lives outdoors, ranchers, hunters, mountain guides, know to respect this old sign. Sundogs mean cold, yes, but they also mean unpredictability. Something is shifting above, and it will fall downward in its own time. So if you ever see them, bright flares on either side of the sun, too precise, too symmetrical, too unnatural, don't just admire the beauty. Feel the air. Note the wind. Listen for the silence, because the sky is speaking in ancient terms, and what follows may not just be weather. It may be the return of strange days, those that don't follow rules, don't honor seasons, and don't care what calendars claim. The sun has doubled. The world may too. If the wind changed at sunset, trouble came. Since ancient times, the changing patterns of the wind have been among the most vital signals nature offers to those who depend on the Earth's bounty. Before modern weather forecasting, farmers, sailors, and villagers lived by their senses, learning to read the subtle shifts in air and sky as direct messages about what the hours ahead might bring. One of the most ominous signs recorded across history was a sudden change in the wind's direction at sunset. For generations, this shift was feared, especially during the critical harvest season, because it almost always heralded trouble. Picture a rural village at dusk in a time before clocks and weather stations, when daily life was inextricably linked to the rhythms of nature. The air has been calm or steady for hours, and workers are finishing their day's labor, preparing for the harvest, or returning home with bundles of grain and fruit. Suddenly, the wind veers sharply. It changes direction, perhaps from a gentle westerly breeze to a biting northern gust, or from a calm evening air to an oppressive, turbulent rush. This abrupt shift is not random. It is nature's warning bell. Why was this change so feared? The answer is rooted in the very structure of weather systems. In many regions, particularly in Europe and parts of North America, prevailing winds brought predictable weather patterns. A sudden reversal or veering of the wind at sunset often indicated that a low-pressure system or storm front was moving in. These systems brought rain, strong winds, sometimes hail, and could devastate crops left out to dry or ripening on the stalk. For a farmer in the Middle Ages, the timing of this wind change was critical. The harvest season was a time of vulnerability. Crops needed to be gathered and stored before the onset of cold or wet weather. A sudden storm could rot grain, flatten fields, and ruin months of hard labor. A change in wind at sunset was often the first sign that the weather was turning against the farmer, urging a quick retreat and frantic preparations. Historical documents, agrarian almanacs, and folklore abound with warnings about this very sign. In some cultures, the wind's change at dusk was not just a meteorological event, but a spiritual omen. It was said that spirits or unseen forces stirred with the evening air, bringing with them the fury of storms and misfortune. Harvest festivals and rituals sometimes included prayers or offerings to appease these forces and protect the crops from harm. This understanding wasn't just superstition. Observers noticed consistent correlations between the wind's behavior and impending weather. Shepherds, too, relied on these cues. Their flocks were vulnerable to exposure, and a sudden wind shift at sunset meant shelter must be sought quickly. Villagers shared these stories around firesides, encoding generations of accumulated wisdom into simple sayings like, "If the wind changes at sunset, trouble comes." Even sailors recognized the importance of this sign. For those at sea or living near coasts, the wind dictated safety or peril. A shift at dusk could mean the difference between a calm night and a violent storm. Mariners would watch the horizon carefully, knowing that winds from different directions carried different weather threats. Today, while technology gives us precise forecasts, the old wisdom still resonates. A sudden wind change at sunset remains a striking experience, an atmospheric cue that reminds us of nature's power and unpredictability. It connects us to a time when human survival was a constant negotiation with the elements. So, next time you feel the evening breeze suddenly turn or pick up, especially as the sun dips low, remember the generations before you who read this sign as a warning. The wind has changed, and with it, the promise of calm may be slipping away. Trouble may be on the horizon, just as it was centuries ago. Crickets in the hearth. Predicted warmth. In the quiet evenings of centuries past, before the hum of modern life filled the air, the gentle chirping of crickets near the hearth held more than a simple melody. It was a natural barometer for the days ahead. Villagers gathered inside their homes, attuned to these tiny musicians, knowing that the intensity and volume of their song were subtle yet powerful predictors of upcoming warmth. This intimate connection between insect behavior and weather was a cornerstone of rural wisdom, bridging the gap between nature's rhythms and human survival. Crickets, small and unassuming creatures, respond sensitively to changes in temperature. Their chirping, produced by rubbing their wings together, is directly influenced by the warmth of their surroundings. Warmer temperatures accelerate their wing movements, increasing the frequency and volume of their song. Thus, a lively chorus near the hearth was a clear sign that milder, warmer days were on the horizon. Villagers keenly listened each evening, relying on this natural cue to anticipate seasonal shifts and plan their activities accordingly. This acoustic forecasting has roots deep in agricultural societies worldwide. Farmers who depended heavily on weather patterns for planting and harvesting incorporated cricket chirps into their repertoire of environmental observations. The louder and more persistent the crickets, the greater the confidence that the cold was retreating and spring or summer warmth was imminent. This was not folklore alone. It was an empirical understanding grounded in long-term observation and experience. Historical texts and ethnographic studies confirm that such knowledge was widespread. In Europe, for example, rural communities regarded the cricket's song as a sign of good fortune and favorable weather. Proverbs like, "When the cricket chirps by the fire, the cold will soon retire," captured this collective wisdom, weaving natural observation into daily life and storytelling. Beyond Europe, similar traditions exist. In parts of Asia, particularly in China and Japan, the sound of crickets has been culturally significant for millennia. It symbolizes vitality and the coming of warm seasons. Poets and scholars often celebrated the cricket's song, linking it to themes of renewal and hope. These societies, too, recognized the cricket's behavior as a practical weather indicator, blending scientific observation with artistic appreciation. The science behind this ancient weather prediction lies in the cricket's physiology. These insects are cold-blooded, meaning their body temperature and metabolic rate depend on external heat sources. As temperatures rise, their nervous system triggers more rapid wing movements to produce chirps. Conversely, in cooler conditions, their chirping slows or ceases altogether. This direct correlation between temperature and cricket song frequency made them reliable, if informal, meteorologists for those who knew to listen. Villagers didn't just hear the chirps, they interpreted their patterns carefully. A sudden increase in volume could signal a forthcoming warm spell, while a gradual decrease warned of cooling temperatures. This nuanced listening shaped community rhythms, when to plant seeds, when to prepare for harvest, and even when to expect visits or celebrations. This natural forecasting method complemented other signs, such as animal behavior, cloud formations, and wind direction. Together, they formed a holistic system of environmental awareness that allowed pre-modern societies to live in harmony with nature's cycles. Even today, despite technological advances, the cricket's song remains a charming reminder of humanity's ancient bond with the environment. Scientists continue to study these insects, not only for their ecological role, but also for insights into bioacoustics and climate indicators. The enduring presence of cricket chirping in literature, music, and folklore attests to its deep cultural resonance. So, when you find yourself by a hearth on a still evening and hear the cricket's lively chorus, remember that you are participating in a timeless tradition. The louder their song is, the more it whispers of approaching warmth and the changing seasons. It's a gentle, natural symphony that has guided countless generations, blending biology and human intuition into a beautiful weather prophecy, a song of hope, renewal, and life itself. The smell of earth meant rain. There is an ancient, almost primal connection between the smell of earth and the coming rain. A scent so powerful it has guided villagers and farmers for generations across continents. Before the era of weather satellites and barometers, people relied on their senses to interpret nature's subtle signals, and none was more evocative than the sharp, distinct aroma that arises just before a storm, the unmistakable smell of earth, damp roots, and the rich soil awakening. This scent was more than just a fragrance. It was a vital warning, a natural herald that rain was imminent. This phenomenon, known scientifically as petrichor, derives from a complex interaction between soil, plants, and atmospheric conditions. When rain approaches, Tiny pores in dry soil and plant roots release oils accumulated during dry periods. These oils, combined with a compound called geosmin produced by soil-dwelling bacteria, become airborne. The scent intensifies as the first droplets disturb the ground, releasing these molecules into the air. For villagers living close to the earth, this was a signal hard to miss, an olfactory cue that weather was about to change dramatically. Historically, this scent carried profound practical importance. In agricultural societies, the timing of rain was crucial. Too much or too little rain could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and famine. Farmers learned to recognize the smell of earth as a natural alarm, prompting them to prepare fields, shelter livestock, and adjust daily activities. This knowledge was woven into the fabric of rural life, passed down orally and recorded in traditional almanacs and weather lore across cultures, from the rainforests of South America to the dry plains of Africa and the temperate fields of Europe. Villagers often described this scent as a deep, rich, and almost sweet aroma, distinct from the fresh, clean smell after rain has fallen. It was the anticipation, the charged atmosphere just before the skies opened. This sensory experience created a powerful emotional response, a mix of relief, expectation, and readiness. It connected people intimately to the cycles of nature, grounding them in the rhythms of their environment. Beyond its practical uses, the smell of earth before rain holds a symbolic and spiritual place in many cultures. In indigenous traditions, it is seen as the earth's breath, a sacred sign of renewal and life-giving water to come. Rituals and prayers often accompanied the anticipation of rain, reflecting the deep respect and gratitude people held for this vital natural force. The scent itself became a metaphor for hope and regeneration, a reminder that after dryness and hardship, nourishment and growth were near. Scientific exploration in recent decades has confirmed what villagers have known intuitively for millennia. Petrichor involves not only geosmin, but also plant oils and bacterial byproducts that create this distinctive smell. Interestingly, humans have evolved a keen sensitivity to these compounds, possibly because recognizing them was essential for survival. The ability to detect petrichor gave early humans an adaptive advantage, enabling them to anticipate rain, find water sources, and plan accordingly. The phenomenon also reveals a remarkable interdependence between the biosphere and atmosphere. Soil microorganisms play a key role in producing the scent, which in turn signals changing weather patterns. This interplay illustrates the intricate connections that sustain ecosystems and human life. The smell of earth before rain is, therefore, a symbol of the invisible networks that link living beings and the environment in a continuous dance of cause and effect. In the modern world, where technology often distances us from nature's direct messages, the smell of earth before rain remains a timeless reminder of our origins and dependence on the natural world. It invites us to pause, breathe deeply, and reconnect with the environment in a sensory way that transcends words and data. That moment, when the sharp scent rises from the soil, calls us to listen and prepare, not just for rain, but for the cycles of life itself. For villagers and farmers of old, this scent was a weather forecast encoded in the very fabric of the earth. It was a gift from the soil, a natural signal that guided survival and nurtured an enduring bond between humans and their land. Today, when we catch that familiar aroma before a storm, we tap into an ancient lineage of wisdom, one that teaches us to trust the earth's subtle voice, to honor its rhythms, and to embrace the promise of rain. Sunlight flickering through leaves was a warning. Before instruments measured wind speeds or satellites mapped storm fronts, people lived in close communion with nature's subtleties, learning to read the world's whispers as vital messages. One of the most mysterious and haunting signs came not from animals or skies, but from light itself, the flickering of sunlight through the leaves of trees. When this dappled light danced unnaturally fast upon tree trunks and the forest floor, ancient villagers believed the wind ghosts were stirring. This eerie phenomenon was more than superstition. It was a warning, a subtle harbinger of changing weather and impending storms. To the untrained eye, sunlight filtering through leaves is a calm, soothing pattern. But to those attuned to nature's rhythms, an accelerating flicker, like shadows racing erratically across bark, meant that wind was picking up strength among the branches. The term wind ghosts poetically captured this invisible force that rustled leaves and bent twigs, signaling that the atmosphere was growing restless. Such imagery, vivid and deeply symbolic, reveals how communities personified nature's invisible elements to make sense of their world. Historically, rural peoples depended on these visual clues to anticipate storms. The flickering of light is caused by leaves swaying quickly in the wind, breaking sunlight into shifting patterns. When the wind moves lightly, the patterns shift slowly and gently. But when gusts grow stronger, these patterns pulse and race, creating an unsettling, rapid flicker. This subtle cue was a natural barometer, indicating rising wind speeds that often preceded thunderstorms or heavy rain. Medieval agrarian societies, especially in Europe's woodlands and farmland, paid close attention to such signs. The weather could determine life or death. Too much rain could drown crops, too little would wither them. The rapid dancing light was a warning that preparations were needed. Animals secured, fires dampened, harvest sheltered. Oral histories speak of families gathering to observe these signs, passing down phrases like, "The wind ghosts are stirring," as mnemonic devices to remember and recognize this vital phenomenon. Ancient texts and folklore also reference the phenomenon in poetic ways. The concept of wind ghosts can be found in various cultures, where wind was seen as a spirit or invisible force that could bring destruction or renewal. In Celtic traditions, for example, the wind was sometimes considered the breath of ancestral spirits, moving through the forest with a life of its own. The flickering light became a visual manifestation of these unseen energies, a bridge between the tangible and the mystical. Beyond Europe, similar beliefs arose in Asia and indigenous cultures worldwide. Many indigenous peoples personified natural elements like wind and light, embedding them into stories and rituals that taught respect for the environment and its volatile moods. The quicksilver shimmer of light through leaves was often seen as a sign that the unseen forces were awakening, urging vigilance and reverence. From a scientific perspective, this flickering effect occurs because leaves oscillate rapidly in gusting winds, breaking and scattering sunlight in constantly shifting patterns. The human eye interprets this as flickering light moving across surfaces. Meteorologists today recognize that increasing wind speeds frequently precede frontal storms and heavy precipitation, confirming the wisdom of those who read these signs long ago. The intensity of this flickering light is not just a visual spectacle, but also an emotional cue. It can stir unease, alerting watchers that the calm is giving way to turbulence. This emotional resonance explains why the phrase "wind ghosts" evokes both mystery and caution, blending observation with folklore to create a compelling narrative around weather's unpredictability. In practical terms, the flickering sunlight served as an early warning system. Before the rumble of thunder or the darkening of skies, the restless shimmer urged preparedness. Crops could be protected, livestock moved to shelter, homes secured. This ancient knowledge, rooted in close observation and poetic imagination, shaped the rhythms of rural life and survival. Even now, in a world dominated by technology and forecasts, The flicker of sunlight through leaves remains a primal sign. Walkers in forests or farmers in fields can feel the shift in light and shadow and sense the wind gathering strength. It is a reminder that despite modern tools, nature's oldest warnings remain relevant and potent. The wind ghosts stirring through leaves invite us to reconnect with the delicate interplay of light, air, and life. They call us to remember that weather is not just a scientific phenomenon, but a living, breathing dance between earth and sky, one that has guided human awareness for millennia. So, when you see sunlight flickering rapidly through the trees, listen closely to the whisper behind the light. It is the voice of the wind stirring unseen ghosts, a timeless herald urging us to prepare, respect, and marvel at the ever-changing sky. Owls heard during daylight meant a storm. In the ancient countryside, where every whisper of wind and flicker of light was studied for meaning, the call of an owl was a sound both feared and revered. At night it was expected, part of the world's natural rhythm. But if an owl cried out during daylight, that rhythm was broken. Villagers would stop what they were doing, murmur prayers, or glance skyward with dread. An owl calling beneath the sun meant something was coming, something unnatural. Not a spirit, not a beast, but a storm. The skies were about to shift. The owl had spoken before the wind arrived. This wasn't just folklore, it was observation refined over generations. In medieval Europe, where most lived by the land and survival was tied to subtle signs, an owl's daytime cry was a code that few dared ignore. Across the British Isles, France, Poland, and parts of Italy, records show that farmers and shepherds believed hearing an owl before dusk meant the weather would soon turn violent. And again it did. Owls, particularly barn owls and tawny owls, were creatures of precision. Their bodies were tuned for the dark, their feathers built for silent flight, their eyes adapted to even the faintest shimmer of moonlight. For such creatures to emerge in daylight, something had to be deeply wrong. Not with the owl, but with the air. What the peasants couldn't measure, the owl could feel. A drop in barometric pressure, subtle disturbances in thermals, or microfluctuations in the wind. All signs a storm was brewing. Owls are notoriously sensitive to these shifts. Their hunting relies on auditory precision, and when the air begins to distort, it throws off their world. Some become restless, confused, or vocal, uttering calls not just of territory, but distress. In daylight, those calls echo like a rupture in the natural order. In the 13th century manuscript De Natura Avium, a monk notes that, "If the owl who shuns the sun doth speak before the dusk, storms shall fall within the morrow." Another record from the rural Welsh borders in 1421 describes a bright morning pierced by owl cry. By evening, trees bent and thatch fell. For people with no forecasts, no alerts, this call became prophecy. And like all prophecies, it was wrapped in fear. Owls were already seen as ominous creatures. Their faces resembled masks. Their cries were ghostly. Some cultures believed they were messengers from the underworld. Others saw them as heralds of plague or death. But in many rural traditions, the owl's warning cry wasn't evil. It was honest. It didn't bring disaster. It simply knew it first. In Italy's northern hill villages, old women would say that when an owl called before the Angelus bell, thunder would follow. In parts of Ireland, a daylight screech meant more than rain. It meant wild skies, the kind that tore fishing boats from their moorings or flooded fields before harvest. And so, whenever the owl broke daylight silence, the village took notice. Children were taught never to mimic an owl's cry in sunlight. Doing so was believed to mock the balance of nature, to invite chaos. Elders told stories of years when owls cried out for 3 days in a row. And then came floods, or snow in summer. One tale from Bavaria tells of a town where every owl was heard during the noonday sun for 2 days. On the third, hailstones fell that shattered every window in the church. Modern science now understands how barometric pressure affects animal behavior. Low pressure, often preceding a storm, can agitate birds, particularly raptors and nocturnal species. Their flight becomes uneasy, their sense of timing disrupted. Some take to calling in confusion, their internal clocks thrown into misalignment by the unstable air. But while we now explain it with metrics and measurements, the core remains. The owl knew first. Sailors, too, took note of owl calls. Coastal ports in England and Brittany recorded owl sightings during foggy days as signs that tempests were forming offshore. Fishermen delayed launches. Nets stayed dry. Better to miss a catch than face a sea stirred by the breath of a storm. There is something deeply haunting about the idea of an owl flying beneath the sun. Its shape does not belong there. Its silence is replaced by sound. And that sound, once heard, cannot be forgotten. It means the world is no longer predictable. It means something wild is coming. Even today, those who live far from cities still pause when they hear it. A daylight owl call, strange, piercing, unexpected, is more than a bird's voice. It's an echo of ancient knowing, a sound older than our instruments, older than our language. It's the pulse of the natural world warning us, brace yourself. So the next time you hear that cry at noon or mid-morning, don't dismiss it. Stop. Look at the trees. Feel the air. Because what follows may not be a gentle breeze. The skies are stirring. The pressure is falling. And the owl, long misunderstood, has sounded the alarm. If ash trees sprouted before oak, prepare for soak. For countless generations, farmers and villagers across Europe have looked to the natural world not just for its beauty, but as a living calendar, a guide for the rhythms of planting, harvesting, and weather. Among the many signs woven into rural wisdom, one of the most enduring and poetic is the old rhyme, "If the oak before the ash, you'll only get a splash. But if the ash before the oak, the sky will soak." This simple verse carries centuries of observation about the natural order of tree leafing and the weather patterns that follow. To understand why this rhyme matters, imagine a time before thermometers and weather stations, when the fate of a year's crops depended on subtle changes in nature. The timing of leaf growth was more than botanical trivia. It was an early warning system about the coming season. Ash trees and oak trees, two of Europe's most common hardwoods, each respond to temperature and climate cues to begin their spring leafing. The sequence in which they sprout leaves can tell an experienced farmer a great deal about what weather lies ahead. When the oak tree leafs out before the ash, it is generally a sign of a warmer, more stable spring. Oaks tend to leaf out a little later than ash trees when conditions are normal. So if the oak leads the ash, the coming rain will be lighter, a mere splash rather than a soaking. This means crops will get enough moisture without the risk of severe flooding or damaging storms. But if the ash tree bursts into leaf before the oak, it signals a colder, wetter spring ahead. This unusual reversal means the conditions that prompt the ash to leaf early, such as sudden temperature changes and moist air, are accompanied by heavy rainfall. The sky will soak, flooding fields, delaying planting, and threatening the success of the harvest. This rhyme is far from mere folklore. It is an encapsulation of detailed ecological knowledge, passed orally through countless generations of farmers who observed their environment with keen eyes. Before scientific studies, they knew that certain plant behaviors mirrored larger weather patterns. The timing of leaf emergence was tied to soil temperatures, air moisture, and seasonal shifts that determined the year's agricultural fortunes. Historical records show that such natural signs were recorded in medieval agrarian manuals and local almanacs. These early guides blended folklore with practical advice, serving as invaluable resources in communities where every growing season could mean survival or famine. The rhyme about oak and ash was one among many rhymes that helped farmers prepare for the challenges ahead, plan sowing schedules, and protect their livestock. The relationship between oak and ash also held cultural significance. Oaks were seen as symbols of strength and endurance, majestic trees associated with gods and kings. Ash trees, lighter and more flexible, were linked to protection and renewal. The sequence of their leafing was sometimes interpreted as a cosmic dance, reflecting the balance between stability and change in nature. Scientists today confirm that the timing of leaf emergence in trees is influenced by temperature, daylight, and moisture levels. Changes in climate patterns can alter these timings, making old rhymes like this one valuable historical data points for understanding long-term environmental changes. For those living close to the land, the oak and ash were natural weather stations, silent and dependable. Their leaves unfolding in the correct order reassured farmers that the spring would be kind. When the sequence reversed, it was a call to prepare for hardship, to brace for heavy rains, muddy fields, and delayed crops. This simple rhyme, therefore, is a bridge across centuries, connecting modern listeners to the ancient rhythms of the earth. It reminds us that before satellites and apps, humans read the world's subtle signs, learning to coexist with nature's unpredictable moods. So when spring arrives and you see ash trees leafing out early, remember the old rhyme and the wisdom it carries. Nature's timing is a message, one written in leaves and weather, urging us to watch closely and prepare wisely. The sky might just be ready to soak. The wind howled like a woman's cry before floods. The eerie, mournful howling of the wind has long stirred the imaginations and fears of villagers throughout history. Before the age of modern weather forecasting, these strange, haunting sounds carried profound meaning, often seen as the very voice of impending disaster. When the wind howled like a woman's cry, communities listened closely, interpreting the wailing as the storm itself lamenting over the fields, warning of floods and devastation soon to come. This vivid metaphor emerged from generations of intimate observation and emotional connection to nature's moods. The wind's sound, especially when channeled through narrow valleys, trees, or between buildings, can take on a plaintive, almost human quality, like a sorrowful wail or a distant cry. For villagers living close to the land and reliant on crops, such sounds were more than unsettling noises. They were portentous signals, stirring both dread and preparedness. Across cultures, the association of wind with voices, spirits, or cries is common. In European folklore, for example, the wind's lament was often described as the sorrow of lost souls or the mourning of nature itself. This personification of the elements was a way for people to understand and emotionally process the raw power of storms and floods, forces that could devastate lives with little warning. The howling wind before floods was particularly significant because it often preceded violent weather changes. Storm systems generating heavy rains and floods are frequently accompanied by strong, turbulent winds. The approach of such systems would send gusts that carried chilling, eerie sounds that filled the night and rattled windows, making the atmosphere thick with tension. Villagers learned to recognize these wails as warnings. The woman's cry was not just poetic imagery, but a vital auditory cue, indicating that waters would soon rise, fields would be submerged, and homes threatened. This knowledge was crucial, enabling people to move livestock, secure possessions, and seek higher ground before floodwaters could engulf their villages. Historical accounts and oral traditions from flood-prone regions across the world attest to this belief. In parts of Britain, the Appalachians, and various river valleys, elders recounted tales of the wind's eerie cries as harbingers of disaster. These stories often blended natural observation with spiritual beliefs, giving the wind a voice that communicated the land's suffering and the storm's wrath. The science behind the wind's haunting sound lies in its interaction with the landscape. As wind rushes through narrow spaces, it can create oscillations and vibrations, whistling through trees, chimneys, or rock formations. These resonances produce the characteristic howling or wailing tones. The faster and more turbulent the wind, the more intense and eerie these sounds become, often reaching a piercing, almost human-like quality. In addition, atmospheric pressure changes before a storm can amplify wind speeds and alter sound propagation, making the cries carry farther and sound more ghostly. To communities without instruments or forecasts, these natural acoustics were indispensable signals. Beyond practical warnings, the symbolic meaning of the wind's cry deepened cultural connections to place and nature. The woman's cry evoked empathy and respect for the forces shaping the environment. It reminded villagers of their vulnerability, but also their resilience, spurring communal action in the face of natural threats. This metaphorical understanding of the wind remains alive in literature, music, and art, where the howling wind often symbolizes sorrow, loss, or nature's voice. Though science now explains the mechanics behind these sounds, the emotional power and cultural resonance continue to enrich human experience. Next time the wind howls through your surroundings, listen closely. That eerie, wailing sound is not just noise. It's an ancient voice carrying stories of storms past and warnings for the future. It is nature's lament, a cry of warning, and a call to prepare. A haunting reminder of the deep, timeless dialogue between humans and the elements that shape their lives. Bubbles. Gathering in water barrels. Predicted rain. Long before the age of satellites and meteorological instruments, people relied on nature's subtle cues to forecast the weather. Cues often invisible to the casual observer, but vital for survival. Among these signs, one peculiar yet powerful indicator was the gathering of bubbles in water barrels or wells. In many villages around the world, when bubbles formed and lingered in stored water, it was understood as a harbinger of rain soon to come. This curious phenomenon, passed down through generations, carried profound practical significance rooted in both natural processes and human necessity. Water barrels and wells were the lifeblood of rural communities, repositories of precious fresh water collected and conserved for drinking, cooking, and irrigation. The appearance of bubbles on their surface was a quiet signal, one that villagers learned to read with care and respect. These bubbles, seemingly mundane, represented changes in the atmosphere and water below, changes that foreshadowed the arrival of rainstorms. Scientifically, the formation of bubbles in such containers is linked to shifts in atmospheric pressure and temperature that precede rainfall. As a low-pressure system approaches, the air above water bodies becomes less dense, causing dissolved gases in the water to come out of solution, forming visible bubbles. Additionally, changes in temperature can increase microbial activity or release trapped gases from sediments, contributing to this bubbling effect. For villagers attuned to their environment, these bubbles were a natural alarm bell, a visible and tangible sign that rain was imminent. Historically, this knowledge was part of a broader system of weather lore that combined animal behavior, cloud patterns, wind direction, and physical phenomena. Farmers, gardeners, and travelers integrated these signs into their daily decisions, choosing when to plant crops, cover harvests, or seek shelter. The bubbling in water barrels was particularly valuable because it offered an early, observable clue that did not rely on skywatching alone. In times when a sudden downpour could devastate unprotected fields or flood homes, such advanced warning was priceless. Across cultures, this phenomenon found expression in proverbs and local sayings. Some rural communities regarded bubbling water as the voice of the earth speaking through its waters, a mystical sign linking land, sky, and human life. The bubbles symbolized nature's pulse, a rhythm that, if listened to carefully, revealed the secrets of the coming storm. This deep respect for natural signs highlights humanity's enduring connection to the environment and our reliance on subtle, often overlooked cues. Moreover, the bubbles in water barrels reveal the intricate interplay between hydrology and meteorology. The interaction of atmospheric pressure changes, water chemistry, and microbial life beneath the surface underscores how interconnected natural systems are. These interactions produce signs that, while invisible to most, become clear indicators for those who watch closely. Villagers learned to decode these signals, transforming natural phenomena into practical knowledge essential for daily life. In modern times, with the advent of weather forecasts and scientific instrumentation, such signs may seem quaint or outdated. Yet, in many rural and indigenous communities, this traditional wisdom remains alive and valued. It serves as a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology, nature's own indicators retain their relevance and power. Observing bubbles in water is a tactile, immediate experience, grounding people in the present moment and fostering a deeper awareness of their surroundings. The phenomenon also carries metaphorical significance. Bubbles rising from still water evoke images of anticipation and change, a surface disturbance that heralds transformation. Just as these bubbles signal approaching rain, they remind us of the hidden movements beneath calm exteriors, forces of nature quietly shifting, preparing to renew and refresh. This symbolism resonates with the human experience of waiting, watching, and sensing the unseen before it arrives. Ultimately, the gathering of bubbles in water barrels before rain exemplifies the profound relationship between humans and the natural world, a relationship built on observation, respect, and adaptation. It is a testament to human ingenuity in reading the environment, transforming subtle phenomena into life-saving knowledge. The next time you see bubbles shimmering on a water surface, remember that you are witnessing an ancient natural signal, a delicate forecast whispered through water, carrying the promise of rain. Cats washing behind their ears meant rain. Long before the convenience of weather forecasts and digital alerts, people lived closely intertwined with nature, reading the smallest signs as vital messages. Among the most curious and consistent warnings came not from the sky or the wind, but from an unlikely source: cats. Those mysterious, independent creatures who have shared human homes for millennia were believed to carry ancient wisdom of the weather. Observers noted that when cats began washing behind their ears with unusual focus and frequency, a storm was often near. They called this behavior cleaning before the mud, a natural warning that rain was imminent. This quaint yet powerful weather lore traces back through centuries of human experience and observation. Cats have been companions since ancient times, their behavior studied closely by farmers, sailors, and villagers who depended on timely weather knowledge. The connection between feline grooming habits and the coming rain was no coincidence, but rooted in a deep understanding of subtle environmental cues. Cats, like many animals, are finely attuned to atmospheric changes. Before a storm, barometric pressure falls, humidity rises, and the air grows heavy with moisture. These shifts can affect animals in ways humans rarely notice directly. For cats, The increase in humidity irritates their skin and fur, prompting them to groom more vigorously, especially sensitive areas like behind the ears where moisture can gather. This heightened grooming was a visible behavioral signal that nature was preparing for rain, and humans learned to interpret it as such. Historical records and folklore from Europe provide a glimpse into how widespread and respected this knowledge was. In rural England, for example, farmers watched their cats carefully during changing seasons. When the feline ritual of washing behind the ears intensified, preparations would begin, fields secured, livestock sheltered, and homes readied for the mud and wet that storms would bring. Such observations were passed down in stories, rhymes, and proverbs, embedding the cat's behavior into the fabric of agricultural life. In maritime cultures, cats also played a symbolic and practical role. Sailors valued cats aboard ships not just for pest control, but also for their intuitive connection to weather. A cat's restless grooming before storms was taken as an early sign of brewing tempests at sea, allowing crews to prepare their vessels for rough weather. These feline warnings were woven into the lore of seafaring and survival on open waters. Beyond Europe and the seas, cultures worldwide recognized animals' sensitivity to weather changes, and cats were often central figures. In ancient Egypt, where cats were revered as sacred beings, their behavior was closely observed for omens and signs. The ancient belief that cats possessed mystical insight into natural forces gave added weight to their role as weather predictors. From a scientific perspective, the link between cats grooming before rain and atmospheric conditions is supported by understanding animal biology and environmental science. Changes in air pressure and humidity influence the nervous systems and sensory receptors of animals, including cats. Their heightened grooming before storms is a response to physical sensations such as skin irritation or discomfort caused by moisture in the air. This behavioral adaptation, while evolved for their comfort, incidentally served as a natural alert system for humans. This connection between cats and weather also reveals the broader theme of humans reading animal behavior to predict nature's moods. In times before technology, the natural world was the only source of knowledge. The cat's meticulous grooming became a piece of a larger mosaic of signs. The low flight of swallows, the croaking of frogs, the flickering of light through leaves, all communicating the impending arrival of rain or storms. The phrase, "cleaning before the mud," captures the practical wisdom embedded in this observation. It acknowledges the inevitable dirt and wet that follow rain, and the cat's instinctual need to prepare, just as humans must prepare their lives and lands. It is a reminder of the deep bond between humans and animals, forged through shared survival and mutual observation. Even today, in our modern world filled with forecasts and apps, many still look to their cats for subtle clues. When a feline suddenly focuses on washing behind its ears with unusual care, it remains a charming and sometimes accurate sign that rain may be on the way. This enduring piece of weather lore connects us to centuries of watchers who found meaning and guidance in the smallest behaviors of creatures around them. So, next time you see a cat licking behind its ears with earnest intent, remember you are witnessing an ancient dialogue between animal and environment, a whisper from nature's intuitive guardians signaling the coming rain, and a timeless bond between humans and their feline companions. If bees stayed in, so should you. In the quiet hours of morning, long before weather forecasts or storm sirens, the people of the land would glance toward the bee yard. If the hives were buzzing, if golden bodies danced in and out of the wooden cracks, the day was safe. But if the hives were still, eerily still, something was wrong. The villagers would cancel plans, delay planting, hold off on long journeys, and even postpone weddings. Because if the bees stayed in, so should you. To modern minds, it might seem like an exaggeration, but in the lives of medieval farmers, shepherds, and foragers, bees were more than honeymakers. They were trusted environmental sentinels. No other creature responded with such precise sensitivity to air quality, humidity, temperature, and barometric pressure. And so, their behavior became a form of prophecy. When the bees refused to fly, it wasn't laziness. It was warning. Throughout rural Europe, this wisdom took deep root. In the French countryside, there was an old saying, "Si l'abeille ne sort pas, cache ton pas." If the bee doesn't go out, neither should your foot. In the Highlands of Scotland, it was said that bees saw the sky with clearer eyes than priests. And in Germany, some farmers wouldn't till a field until the bees began their spring flights, even if the sun was shining. Because bees didn't care about light. They responded to the air itself. Bees measure the world in pressure, scent, and vibration. A sudden drop in barometric pressure, often preceding storms or cold fronts, makes the air heavier, confusing their flight patterns. Moisture and static charge in the atmosphere disturb their navigation. So they stay in, clustering inside the hive, humming low like a choir waiting for a safe passage. To those who observed this often, it wasn't magical, it was reliable. Records from as early as the 11th century describe monks in English abbeys delaying seed planting when their apiaries were silent. In 1315, during the Great Famine of Northern Europe, some chronicles blamed crop failure not only on excessive rain, but on ignoring the bees' warnings. "The bees did not leave, yet we sowed," one parchment reads, "and the sky punished us with rot and mud." It wasn't just about agriculture. Travel, too, was affected. In small villages where roads were little more than mud tracks, a storm could turn a journey into a death sentence. So when bees didn't stir by mid-morning, merchants stayed put. Children kept home. Caravans waited. The absence of bees in the air was as serious as a black cloud on the horizon. You didn't challenge their silence. You obeyed it. In many parts of Italy, brides were warned not to wed on days when bees remained indoors. A still hive was considered a bad omen, believed to signal not just bad weather, but potential sorrow in the household's future. Some traditions even required brides to walk past hives on the morning of their ceremony. If the bees stirred, the marriage would flourish. If not, the ceremony was quietly rescheduled. Beekeepers, often seen as part sorcerer and part sage in rural life, were entrusted with interpreting hive behavior. Some would press an ear to the hive wall and listen, not for noise, but for tone. A low, agitated hum without movement was the sound of a storm already forming somewhere unseen. And often, they were right. One 17th-century Flemish beekeeper recorded in his diary that a still hive is not a resting hive, it is one holding its breath. What's extraordinary is that even today, this ancient wisdom holds true. Modern meteorologists studying insect behavior confirm that bees are deeply affected by atmospheric pressure changes. In controlled studies, bees' foraging behavior dropped by over 60% in the hours before a thunderstorm, often long before clouds formed. In open fields, hives remained closed, even when skies appeared clear. To the untrained eye, it might look like nothing, just a quiet morning. But the villagers knew better. Nature is rarely quiet without reason. When the bees didn't emerge, it was a message written in stillness. Not all storms come with thunder. Some begin with silence. Even now, for those who watch closely, the bees continue their quiet signaling. Gardeners know a bloom-filled yard can still fall silent before a storm. Forest hikers have noticed birdsong pause and bees vanish just before the wind shifts. It's an ancient rhythm, woven into the world, and it still beats. So the next time the sun rises and the skies seem fair, don't trust your eyes alone. Walk past a hive. Listen to the world's most precise weathermen. If the bees are staying in, so should you. Because the sky is about to speak in storms, and the bees have already heard it, sudden summer stillness was feared. Throughout history, those who lived close to nature have learned to read the world not just by what happens, but by what suddenly does not happen. One of the most unsettling signs of approaching storm was the sudden, heavy stillness that could descend on a summer afternoon or evening, a breathless calm where the air hung thick, birds fell silent, and the familiar breeze vanished. This phenomenon, known in folklore as weather holding its sword, was feared across countless generations because it was the calm before chaos, a silent warning that storms were imminent. Imagine a rural village on a warm summer day. The sun is high, but a sudden hush takes hold. The usual rustling of leaves stops. Birdsong ceases abruptly, as if nature itself is holding its breath. The wind that once played through fields and trees dies down to an eerie nothingness. The air feels heavy, almost oppressive, as if time itself pauses. For those who knew these signs, this stillness was a message more urgent than thunder or lightning. A storm was coming, and it would be fierce. The phrase, weather holding its sword, vividly captures the tension of that moment. The atmosphere poised like a warrior ready to strike. In agrarian societies, this was not mere poetic imagery, but a deeply practical signal. Storms following such stillness were often violent, bringing heavy rain, thunder, lightning, and sometimes hail. Crops left vulnerable could be damaged or destroyed. Livestock could panic, and homes and lives were at risk. The calm was nature's moment of gathering strength before unleashing fury. Why does this happen? Scientifically, the sudden stillness arises as air masses shift and stabilize briefly just before a storm front moves in. The dropping barometric pressure and increasing humidity change how the air flows. Birds and insects, highly sensitive to these atmospheric changes, stop their activity, seeking shelter or silence. The wind cessation signals a lull before the turbulence that follows. This heavy calm can be almost suffocating, a tangible tension in the air. Historical accounts from Europe, Asia, and the Americas describe this phenomenon. In medieval times, farmers and shepherds passed down stories warning of this sudden silence as an omen. The stillness was mentioned in old weather lore, often alongside other natural signs such as the redness of the sky or the behavior of animals. It became a crucial part of traditional forecasting, encoded in language and ritual. Some cultures attributed supernatural meanings to this stillness. It was seen as the moment when spirits or gods held back their wrath, preparing to strike. In parts of northern Europe, it was believed the sword was the weapon of thunder gods, ready to fall. In other regions, the silence was the breath of the earth itself, gathering strength to cleanse and renew through the storm. These beliefs reinforced respect for nature's power and the need to heed its warnings. The practical value of recognizing this stillness cannot be overstated. Before technology, these natural cues were often the only chance to prepare for destructive weather. Farmers might hurry to bring in the last harvest, shepherds would shelter their flocks, and families would secure their homes. Ignoring the weather holding its sword often meant suffering losses that could threaten entire communities. Even today, this phenomenon resonates. Modern meteorology explains the science, but the experience remains deeply visceral. That sudden hush, the heavy, breathless air, it still carries a primal warning. It reminds us that despite centuries of progress, we remain part of a natural world that speaks in subtle signs. So next time you find yourself in a sudden summer stillness, when the birds fall silent and the breeze dies, remember the ancient wisdom embedded in that moment. The weather is holding its sword, and the storm is gathering its strength. It is a reminder to respect nature's power and prepare for what may come. A. Horses snorting and stamping meant lightning. For centuries, villagers have watched their horses with keen eyes, knowing that these noble animals possess a heightened sensitivity to the subtle changes in the atmosphere that often precede storms. When horses began snorting nervously and stamping their hooves, it was a signal taken far more seriously than any distant priest's weather prediction. This instinctive behavior became a trusted barometer, an early warning system that lightning and tempest were soon to follow. Horses, like many animals, are finely attuned to shifts in barometric pressure, humidity, and even the faint electrical charges in the air before a thunderstorm. Their acute senses detect these invisible changes long before humans can perceive them. The restlessness they display, snorting, pawing the ground, tossing their heads, reflects their primal urge to prepare for danger. To the villagers who depended on the land and weather for survival, reading these signs was a matter of life and death. Historical accounts from rural communities across Europe, Asia, and the Americas show that people valued the behavior of horses as one of the most reliable natural predictors. Unlike formal forecasts from priests or scholars, often based on omens or theological interpretations, the reactions of horses were immediate, observable, and trustworthy. Folklore is rich with sayings such as, "When the horse is wild, lightning is near," or "Heed the horse's fear, for the storm is here," underscoring the deep respect for equine intuition. The scientific basis for this behavior lies in horses' evolutionary adaptations. As prey animals, they developed heightened sensory organs to detect predators and environmental threats. Changes in atmospheric pressure can affect their inner ears and respiratory system, triggering unease. Additionally, the static electricity buildup and the scent of ozone that often accompany thunderstorms may cause horses discomfort or alarm, prompting their visible distress. Farmers and riders learned to interpret these signs carefully. A horse's sudden agitation meant that preparations were necessary, securing crops, bringing livestock to shelter, and preparing homes for the impending storm. This reliance on animal behavior formed part of a larger system of natural forecasting that included observing birds, insects, and other wildlife. In many cultures, horses held symbolic importance, not only as weather prophets, but also as sacred animals connected to divine forces governing nature and fate. Their reactions to storms were sometimes woven into spiritual narratives, blending practical knowledge with myth and ritual. This dual role reinforced the authority of horses as both natural and supernatural messengers. Today, despite the sophistication of meteorological instruments, the behavior of horses and other animals still offers valuable clues about imminent weather changes. Equine trainers and farmers recognize the signs of nervousness and restlessness as indicators to watch the skies closely. This ancient bond between humans and horses continues to inform and enrich our understanding of nature's rhythms. So when you see a horse snort sharply and stamp its hooves in sudden panic, remember that you are witnessing an instinct honed over millennia, a living alarm system tuned to the electrical charge in the air and the coming flash of lightning. Far beyond superstition, this behavior is a testament to the deep, intuitive connection between animals and the ever-shifting skies above, a connection that countless generations of villagers have trusted and respected long before science could explain it. A rainbow in the morning meant rain. There is something timeless and deeply poetic about a rainbow appearing in the morning sky, a vibrant arch of colors that has, for centuries, carried a warning and a lesson for those who work the land. The ancient rhyme, "Rainbow in the morning, shepherd take warning," Rainbow at night, shepherd's delight, is more than a charming verse. It is a distilled piece of meteorological wisdom passed down through generations, guiding farmers, shepherds, and villagers in interpreting the skies and preparing for the day ahead. This saying encapsulates a deep understanding of weather patterns, reflecting humanity's age-old dance with nature's unpredictable moods. The rainbow, a natural marvel created by sunlight refracting through water droplets, has long fascinated human beings. But the timing of its appearance, whether in the morning or evening, reveals much more than beauty. It unveils the state of the atmosphere and impending weather. A rainbow seen in the morning often signals that moisture-laden weather systems are approaching, bringing rain and storms. Conversely, a rainbow at sunset usually means that the worst of the weather has passed, promising clear skies and fair weather. This weather lore has its roots in the daily movement of weather fronts across mid-latitude regions where prevailing winds typically move from west to east. In such climates, a morning rainbow appears in the east, where the sun rises, while rain clouds approach from the west. Seeing a rainbow in the morning means that rain clouds are moving toward you and precipitation is likely to follow. On the other hand, a rainbow in the evening appears in the west, indicating that the rain has passed and clear skies are approaching. Shepherds and farmers, whose livelihoods depended on these patterns, learned to trust this simple yet effective natural forecast. Historically, this rhyme has been found in various forms throughout Europe and beyond, woven into folk traditions, poetry, and agricultural calendars. Its endurance speaks to the practical value it provided in times before modern meteorology. The rhyme's rhythm made it easy to remember, and its vivid imagery connected people emotionally to the natural world. It also served as a cautionary tale, urging vigilance and preparedness to avoid losses from unexpected storms. Scientifically, the phenomenon behind this saying can be explained through an understanding of light, moisture, and atmospheric dynamics. Rainbows form when sunlight passes through raindrops, bending and reflecting to create a spectrum of colors. The sun must be low in the sky, early morning or late afternoon, for a rainbow to be visible. The presence of a rainbow indicates moisture in the air opposite the sun, revealing the location of rain clouds. Thus, the rainbow's position in the sky becomes a directional indicator of weather movement. This proverb also reflects the deep connection between humans and the land, where everyday observations informed survival strategies. Shepherds, tending flocks in open fields, were particularly attentive to weather signs. Rain could endanger their animals, damage pastures, or disrupt travel. The rainbow's appearance was a visual cue, embedded in their daily routines, influencing decisions from sheltering sheep to scheduling work. In this way, the rhyme represents a blend of natural science and cultural tradition. Beyond its practical roots, the rainbow in this context carries symbolic weight. It represents hope and warning, beauty and caution, the delicate balance between joy and vigilance. The morning rainbow's warning reminds us that nature's beauty often comes with challenges, while the evening rainbow's delight offers reassurance and peace. This duality captures the human experience of living with nature's uncertainty. Today, despite technological advances in weather prediction, the rhyme remains popular and meaningful. It connects us to a shared heritage of observation and respect for the environment. In rural communities and even urban settings, people still find wisdom and comfort in these age-old sayings, reminding us that sometimes the simplest signs hold the deepest truths. In essence, rainbow in the morning, shepherd take warning, rainbow at night, shepherd's delight, is a testament to humanity's enduring relationship with nature. It encapsulates centuries of knowledge in a few poetic words, teaching us to read the sky, heed its warnings, and celebrate its promises. The next time a rainbow arcs across the morning sky, remember that it is not just a fleeting spectacle, but a signal, a colorful message from the heavens that rain is near, and preparation is wise. Leaves turning underside up meant wind. Before weather satellites and instruments measured gusts and gales, people relied on nature's subtle language to prepare for the unseen forces of the air. Among the many signs, one of the most telling and vivid was the flipping of tree leaves, especially the slender, delicate leaves of ash and birch trees. When villagers noticed these leaves turning underside up in the breeze, it was a signal that sudden gusts of wind were approaching. This seemingly simple natural gesture carried deep meaning, a weather warning born of centuries of careful observation and survival instinct. The underside of many tree leaves is often lighter in color, sometimes silvery or paler than the upper surface, and shaped differently to catch or resist the wind. When a breeze strengthens, these leaves begin to twist and turn, revealing their pale undersides as if the tree itself were signaling a change. Ash and birch leaves are particularly sensitive due to their thin, flexible petioles and broad, flat blades, making their movement a reliable indicator of shifting air currents. For early rural communities, such changes were critical. Wind could bring storms that damaged crops, scatter seeds prematurely, or threaten the safety of homes and livestock. The sight of leaves flipping quickly in the wind became a visual barometer, alerting villagers to brace for stronger gusts. Farmers would take cover for themselves and their animals, secure lightweight tools and grain stores, and prepare hearths against sudden chill winds. This knowledge was woven deeply into folk tradition and local wisdom. Across Europe, where ash and birch trees commonly grew, farmers and woodsmen spoke of the turning leaf omen, passing the phrase down like a secret code of survival. In medieval England, birch groves were considered natural weather stations, their rustling and leaf flips watched closely to predict the coming wind's strength and direction. Historical texts and agricultural manuals from the past also reference this phenomenon. The observation that leaves reveal their undersides before the arrival of gusty wind was often recorded alongside other signs such as cloud shapes and animal behavior. These writings, while lacking modern scientific detail, captured a truth verified through generations of experience and the necessity of understanding nature's language. Beyond Europe, indigenous peoples in northern climates revered birch trees not only for their practical uses, such as bark for shelter and containers, but also for their role as weather sentinels. The flipping of birch leaves was a sign that the invisible forces of the air were awakening, a prompt to respect the changing elements and prepare accordingly. Scientifically, the phenomenon occurs because as wind speed increases, the aerodynamic forces on the leaves cause them to twist or turn to reduce drag or prevent damage. This exposes the lighter undersides, creating a flickering effect that signals instability in the air. Meteorologists today recognize that gust fronts and wind shifts often precede storms, and that plant responses are natural bioindicators of these changes. The emotional resonance of this sign should not be underestimated. Seeing the leaves suddenly flip and shimmer can stir a primal awareness, a feeling that something unseen yet powerful is moving through the environment. This sensation was encapsulated in phrases like, "The leaves turn like flags," evoking both warning and beauty, and inspiring stories about the wind's invisible journey. For villagers living in harmony with their environment, the flipping leaves were part of a larger mosaic of signs. Alongside darkening skies, the behavior of birds, and the smell of earth rising, the leaves' underside flickers warned of approaching windstorms that could reshape their day or season. This intimate knowledge of natural rhythms shaped agriculture, travel, and daily routines, ensuring survival in a world ruled by unpredictable elements. Today, even with weather forecasts delivered by satellites and Doppler radars, the leaves-turning underside-up remain a potent and poetic sign. Walkers in forests or gardeners feel the significance when they see this natural signal, a reminder that the air is alive, shifting, and carrying forces beyond immediate sight. It connects us to centuries of watchers who learned to see the world through nature's subtle cues. So when you notice leaves suddenly flipping to reveal their pale undersides, especially on ash or birch trees, know that you are witnessing an ancient conversation between earth and air. It is a natural warning, a visual herald of gusts on the way, and a timeless lesson that even the smallest leaf holds stories of survival, weather, and the delicate balance of life. Ants. Building high walls around holes. Meant flooding. In the soil at your feet, where most would see only dirt and dust, the old villagers saw signs. Ancient signals written not in stars or scrolls, but in the movements of ants. Long before the skies darkened or the river swelled, they would stoop low and examine the earth. And if they found that the ants had raised their walls, if the mounds around their tiny homes were taller, thicker, or ringed like fortresses, they knew what was coming: flood. To modern minds, this might seem like peasant superstition, but to those who lived in flood-prone valleys, it was a matter of life and death. In the lowlands of the Rhine, in the French countryside, along the English fenlands, and across the rice-growing paddies of early Italy, this wisdom was passed quietly from generation to generation. When the ants build high, move what matters. It was more accurate than a priest's blessing or a nobleman's decree, because the ants always knew first. In countless medieval villages, the sight of reinforced anthills triggered swift, silent action. Farmers stopped loading carts and began hauling grain to higher shelves. Hay was pulled from low barns and piled atop rocks. Tools were lifted, not because of clouds, but because of dirt. And more than once, that dirt saved them. The reason lies in the extraordinary sensitivity of ants. These tiny engineers can detect shifts in humidity, air pressure, and even soil saturation long before those changes are visible or felt by humans. Their underground networks, deep and sprawling, give them early warning. When the ground begins to swell with moisture, when the air thickens and barometric pressure falls, ants react fast. They don't flee, they build. Their mounds rise like earthen castles. Entrances narrow. Channels are sealed. And to those who've watched them for centuries, this sudden labor means only one thing: rising water. There are records, quiet, handwritten notes in abbey ledgers and village chronicles, that confirm this pattern. In 1328, a scribe in Kent wrote of mounds risen like little towers near the wheat field. The beekeeper said the flood would come, and it did. In the archives of a Tuscan monastery, a monk described seeing the ants ring their hole with clay walls thicker than usual, and how the brothers then moved their food stores to the chapel's upper floors, barely saving them when the Arno flooded days later. This wasn't rare. In Poland, farmers near the Vistula trained their sons to walk the field edges each spring, inspecting anthills like holy relics. If they were low and loose, planting could begin. If they were tall and tight, planting was delayed, sometimes by weeks. In the Dordogne, where rivers often swallowed entire roads, a fortified anthill near a storage barn was enough reason to halt travel. Stories tell of whole caravans delayed by one such warning, spared from drowning by the whispers of insects. Even more haunting are the legends that speak of those who ignored the signs. One 15th century ballad from Brittany tells of a farmer mocked by neighbors for moving his grain when the ants began their games. Days later, the rains came, washing away the village while his barn stood dry on a hilltop. It was a warning disguised as a fable, and across Europe, everyone knew the rule. When the ants build up, you do too. Science now supports what peasants once knew by heart. Entomologists confirm that ants modify their mound structures in response to changes in environmental moisture, building taller and steeper to protect brood chambers from being flooded. In fact, their behavior often precedes rainfall by several hours, or in some cases, days. Because the ants don't wait for the storm, they prepare for its consequence. And the villagers, in turn, learn to prepare with them. Some beekeepers kept ants nearby, not for pest control, but as warning systems. Shepherds would look for anthills along pastures. If they found them high and rimmed like battlements, they would shift the flock uphill. In monasteries that doubled as hospitals, the presence of reinforced anthills often prompted the relocation of sickbeds, long before any storm struck. It wasn't magic. It was mutual memory, the shared rhythm of creature and human responding to the pulse of the earth. Even today, in parts of rural India, China, and Eastern Europe, some farmers still observe this ancient code. A sudden flurry of anthill building, walls thick and steep like clay parapets, means tarps are pulled over beds, stores are shifted to cinder blocks, and tractors are parked away from the floodline. Because even in a world of radar and digital alerts, some trust what moves beneath their feet more than what flashes on a screen. So, the next time you walk a field after dry days and see a freshly built anthill standing tall, higher than before, reinforced at the base, ringed with care, don't just step over it. Stop. Look around. Smell the air. The sky may be blue, the breeze still warm, but the ants are already preparing for a world about to change, and if they've moved the earth to stay safe, perhaps you should too. Children sneezing at sunrise was an omen. Since ancient times, human societies have turned to signs and omens to understand the unseen forces shaping their lives. Among the many natural signals that villagers watched for, one curious yet deeply rooted belief stood out. When several children sneezed at sunrise, it was seen as an ominous sign, a herald that a cold front was approaching. This seemingly simple phenomenon was woven into the fabric of daily life and weather lore, carrying a weight far beyond the sneeze itself. Imagine a village waking to the first light of dawn, where children stir from sleep and begin their morning routines. In some moments, multiple children might suddenly sneeze, an involuntary response, yet interpreted by the elders as a message from the environment. In a time before thermometers or weather forecasts, such bodily reactions were closely observed and linked to changes in the atmosphere. Villagers believed that early morning sneezing, especially when it happened among several children, signaled a drop in temperature and the arrival of cold, damp air, a cold front that could bring frost, chills, or illness. Why children? In folklore and observation, children were considered especially sensitive to the environment. Their developing immune systems and more acute responses to subtle changes in air quality made them natural barometers for the community. When they sneezed together at sunrise, it was as if their bodies were attuned to the shifting weather before adults could perceive it. Across Europe, Asia, and parts of the Americas, similar beliefs emerged independently. In rural villages, elders shared stories warning that sneezing children meant a cold front was on the way, bringing not just discomfort, but potential threats to crops, livestock, and health. The cold fronts were often associated with early frosts or damp, chilling rains that could ruin harvests or spread illness, especially dangerous to the young and elderly. Historically, these observations found their way into early medical and agrarian texts. Folk healers and wise women might advise taking precautions, layering clothing, safeguarding food supplies, or keeping vulnerable family members warm when children exhibited this sneezing omen. The sneeze became a natural weather alert system, embedded in community knowledge and survival strategy. This phenomenon also carried symbolic meaning. Sneezing was sometimes viewed as a bodily expulsion of evil spirits or bad air, linking it to broader beliefs about health and purity. The timing, at sunrise, a liminal moment between night and day, heightened its significance. The dawn sneeze was seen as the body's way of signaling transition and warning, an embodied alert to impending change. Scientifically, sneezing can be triggered by sudden exposure to cold air or changes in humidity and pressure, conditions that often accompany the passage of a cold front. Children, more sensitive to these variations, may indeed sneeze more frequently during such shifts, lending empirical support to this ancient weather omen. For farming communities dependent on the rhythm of seasons, these signs were vital. A cold front could shorten the growing season, damage emerging plants, or increase the risk of respiratory illnesses spreading among humans and animals. Paying attention to the subtle signals like morning sneezes helped communities prepare for hardship and adapt to the unpredictable moods of nature. Today, while we rely on weather apps and satellites, the old wisdom behind children sneezing at sunrise remains a fascinating glimpse into how humans once listened deeply to their environment. It reminds us that long before modern science, people observed with acute sensitivity, reading not just the skies, but the bodies around them for clues about the world's changing rhythms. So, when you hear of children sneezing as the sun rises, remember it as more than a sneeze. It is a whisper from the past, a natural signal woven through centuries of human experience, warning of cold winds and shifting seasons, urging caution and respect for the fragile balance of life. Candles that wouldn't stay lit meant bad air. For centuries, the humble candle was more than just a source of light in homes. It was a subtle weather gauge, silently reflecting the invisible moods of the air. When a candle's flame flickered wildly or refused to stay lit indoors, villagers took it as a sign that bad air was pressing in, moisture-laden, heavy weather drawing near. This flickering flame became an early warning, a quiet herald of dampness, storms, or rain soon to follow. The science behind this phenomenon lies in the interaction between air pressure, humidity, and the combustion process. Candles burn steadily when the air is stable and dry, but when damp, heavy air infiltrates a home, often before a storm arrives. The increased moisture and falling atmospheric pressure cause the flame to waver, sputter, or even go out. The invisible weight of approaching weather could thus be felt in the trembling candlelight. Historical records and folk wisdom reveal how people, long before modern meteorological tools, relied on such observations to predict weather changes. In European villages, it was commonly said, "If the candle won't burn bright, prepare for wet and blight," a proverb capturing the practical importance of this delicate sign. Households would watch their hearth flames closely, understanding that a failing candle heralded dampness that could threaten crops, travel, and health. The candle's flicker was often linked with the concept of bad air, a term encompassing humidity, fog, and the oppressive feeling that often precedes storms. This bad air was thought to press against walls and seep into homes, disrupting normal life. The candle's struggle to stay lit was a physical manifestation of this invisible force, bridging the gap between the seen and unseen in daily experience. Beyond Europe, similar beliefs and observations existed worldwide. In Asia, traditional homes with oil lamps and candles noted how flames behaved with changes in monsoon winds and humidity. In indigenous cultures, the state of indoor flames was sometimes interpreted as messages from spirits or nature, guiding communities in preparation for weather's shifts. This understanding influenced daily routines. When candles faltered, villagers might delay travel, cover stored grains, or reinforce shelters, actions taken on the quiet warning of an unsteady flame. It was a small but significant tool in humanity's ongoing dialogue with the environment. With the development of modern science, we now recognize how atmospheric conditions impact combustion. Yet, the poetic and practical legacy of the candle's flicker endures as a testament to the ingenuity of early weather watchers. It symbolizes humanity's ability to find meaning and guidance in the simplest of phenomena. Next time you see a candle struggling to stay lit indoors on a damp evening, remember the generations who read this sign with profound attention. That wavering flame is more than a flicker of light. It's a whisper from the air itself, a quiet message that the weather is shifting and that nature's moods are pressing close. It connects us to a timeless tradition of listening, observing, and preparing, an intimate dance between human life and the ever-changing world beyond our walls. Dreaming of waves. Meant long rain, dreams have long been a mysterious bridge between the conscious and the unknown, a place where nature and the human mind intertwine in symbolic language. Among ancient communities deeply attuned to their environment, certain dreams carried powerful meanings, particularly those involving water. Dreaming of waves, rising rivers, or flooding waters was often not dismissed as mere fantasy, but taken as a serious omen of coming weather. The warning was clear: long rain was approaching, and neighbors needed to prepare, patch thatch roofs, dig trenches, and ready themselves for the storm. This belief, rooted in centuries of observation and cultural tradition, reveals the profound ways in which humans have historically read both the outer world and the inner subconscious for signs. Water, a universal symbol of life and renewal, also carries dual connotations of destruction and upheaval. In agrarian societies, where livelihoods depended on the balance of rainfall and drought, dreams of turbulent waters were interpreted as nature's forecast, a subconscious message linking individual psyche to collective survival. Throughout history, many cultures placed great importance on dreams as conveyors of truth and prophecy. Indigenous peoples, ancient civilizations, and rural villagers shared the conviction that dreams could predict real-world events, especially those connected to weather and natural disasters. Dreaming of waves or rivers rising was seen as a direct communication from the environment, a symbolic alert encoded in the language of the unconscious. This dream weather lore served as a complement to other signs: animal behavior, cloud formations, and atmospheric changes, forming a holistic system of prediction. The practical implications of these dream warnings were profound. Heavy, prolonged rains could devastate crops, flood homes, and erode soil. Thatch roofs, common in many rural dwellings, were vulnerable to leaks and damage, while fields needed drainage trenches to prevent waterlogging. Communities that heeded these dream-inspired alerts could take action early, protecting their homes and livelihoods. This blend of spiritual insight and practical response underscores the inseparability of belief and survival in traditional societies. Anthropologists and historians have documented numerous examples of dream interpretation tied to environmental conditions. In many folklore traditions, water in dreams symbolized not just rain, but the emotional and spiritual currents within a community. The rising waters in dreams often represented impending change or upheaval, echoing the real risk of flooding. Such dream imagery helped reinforce social cohesion, as neighbors shared warnings and prepared collectively. The dreamer's vision became a communal asset, a vital piece of intelligence in uncertain times. From a psychological perspective, dreams of water may also reflect heightened awareness of environmental stresses, with subconscious minds processing subtle cues about humidity, temperature, or atmospheric pressure changes. Whether through direct sensory input or inherited cultural knowledge, these dreams linked individual perception with environmental reality, demonstrating the complex interplay between mind, body, and nature. Today, while scientific meteorology relies on satellites and models, the ancient practice of dream interpretation as weather prediction still survives in many rural and indigenous communities. It serves as a powerful reminder of humanity's enduring quest to understand and coexist with the natural world. The dream of waves and rising rivers symbolizes not only impending rain, but the deep human connection to water's life-giving and transformative power. In essence, the belief that dreaming of waves meant long rain is a testament to the human imagination's ability to interpret nature's language through both waking and sleeping life. It reflects a worldview where dreams are not isolated experiences, but part of an intricate system of knowledge guiding action and survival. The next time you hear of someone dreaming of rising waters, remember it is more than a dream. It is an echo of ancient wisdom, a call to prepare, and a vivid reminder of our place within nature's ever-changing rhythms. Sheep huddling tight meant snow. Before the age of modern technology and meteorological forecasts, human survival depended on acute observation of nature's subtle cues. Among the most reliable and vivid signs were the behaviors of animals, whose instincts were finely tuned to the shifting moods of the weather. In pastoral communities, where shepherds tended flocks across vast fields and hills, the actions of sheep held profound significance. When flocks began to huddle tightly together, often unnaturally close, even when the air remained seemingly mild, villagers understood this as an urgent warning. A cold snap or snow was approaching. Sheep, creatures well adapted to temperate climates, have evolved behaviors that help them endure harsh weather. Their instinct to cluster closely serves multiple purposes: conserving body heat, protecting vulnerable individuals from wind chill, and minimizing exposure to the elements. This behavior becomes particularly pronounced before severe weather, when atmospheric pressure drops and temperature begins to fall, even if the change is not yet apparent to human senses. For generations, shepherds learned to read these signs with precision. The flock's unusual tightness was a living barometer, a natural alert system that no instrument could replicate. It was a signal that cold winds or snowstorms might soon sweep across the landscape, endangering crops, livestock, and people. By observing these behaviors, communities could prepare, strengthening shelters, bringing animals into barns, and safeguarding food supplies. Historical accounts from pastoral societies across Europe and Asia document this phenomenon. In the British Isles, for example, folklore describes sheep gathering in dense clusters on open moors or hillsides just hours before snowfall. Farmers spoke of the sheep's cold circle as a sure sign of winter's advance. This observation was deeply embedded in the agrarian calendar, guiding planting, harvesting, and the timing of bringing animals in from the fields. In medieval manuscripts and naturalist writings, the behavior of sheep was often cited alongside other animal predictors of weather. Chroniclers noted that these animals, relying on their acute senses and instincts honed over millennia, acted as early warning systems for their human caretakers. The practice of reading the sheep was a vital part of rural wisdom, passed from elder to youth as a lesson in attentiveness and survival. Beyond Europe, nomadic herders of Central Asia and the mountainous regions of the Himalayas similarly relied on such signs. The tight clustering of sheep or goats foretold freezing temperatures and the imminent arrival of snow, prompting urgent action to move livestock to safer ground or shelter. This behavior was not just practical, but often surrounded by spiritual meaning, with animals seen as linked to the natural and supernatural forces governing the land and weather. Scientifically, The phenomenon is linked to changes in atmospheric pressure and temperature. Animals can sense minute shifts through sensory receptors and changes in air composition. Sheep, with their thick wool and social nature, instinctively gather when a drop in temperature or an increase in wind chill threatens their comfort and safety. The clustering reduces heat loss and provides protection against chilling winds and precipitation. This natural response carries emotional weight as well. Seeing sheep tightly huddled in the open landscape, especially on days that feel deceptively calm, can evoke a sense of foreboding and respect for nature's power. It is a visual cue that even when the world seems still, the atmosphere may be harboring sudden and fierce changes. The metaphor of sheep clustering also resonates with human experience. The instinct to seek warmth, shelter, and safety in community when faced with external threats. This ancient bond between humans and their animals reflects a shared vulnerability to the whims of weather and an interdependence essential for survival. In today's world, where weather forecasts come from satellites and computer models, the sight of sheep huddled tight remains a potent and poetic symbol. In rural areas, shepherds still watch their flocks for this behavior, trusting in nature's own signals as much as in technology. It serves as a reminder of a time when survival depended on the close reading of the natural world, on patience and observation rather than data and algorithms. So, when you see a flock of sheep gathered unnaturally close, even when the air feels mild, remember that you are witnessing a living weather gauge, a natural alarm bell ringing through wool and breath, signaling the coming cold and snow. It is a timeless story of life attuned to nature's rhythms, and a powerful lesson in how animals and humans alike heed the subtle messages of the earth and sky. Heavy morning fog meant a short storm. In the quiet hours of early morning, before the world stirs fully awake, a thick veil of fog often settles over fields, rivers, and valleys. This heavy morning fog, rolling low and dense, has long captured the attention and imagination of those living close to the land. Far from being merely a mysterious natural phenomenon, it was understood as a meaningful sign, a weather message whispered through the mist. For centuries, villagers and farmers believed that when such fog appeared at dawn, it foretold a short storm, a brief disturbance that would soon give way to clear skies and sunlight by midday. This weather lore, passed down through countless generations, reflects a profound relationship between humans and the natural world. Before meteorological science could measure humidity or pressure, people learned to read the shifting moods of the atmosphere by observing its effects on the landscape and the creatures within it. Heavy morning fog was one such sign, offering clues about the day's unfolding weather, a fleeting enigma that spoke of moisture, temperature, and the battle between cloud and sun. Historically, communities nestled in valleys, near rivers, or along coastal plains, places where fog commonly forms, paid close attention to these early mists. In rural Europe, where farming depended on accurate timing, a thick morning fog was a signal both to prepare for moisture in the air and to expect its quick departure. Folk sayings such as morning fog, short rain, midday sun, no pain, became part of the oral tradition, mnemonic rhymes that helped farmers remember the rhythm of weather patterns. The scientific explanation behind this ancient wisdom lies in the interaction of temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. Morning fog forms when the ground cools overnight, causing water vapor near the surface to condense into tiny droplets suspended in the air. This creates a low-lying cloud that blankets the landscape. When the sun rises and heats the earth, the fog burns off as the droplets evaporate, often rapidly. If the fog is dense but confined near the ground, it indicates stable air masses and moisture trapped close to the surface, conditions that commonly precede a short, passing rain or drizzle rather than a prolonged storm. In many regions, this pattern was consistent enough that villagers could rely on it as an informal forecast. The burning off of fog by midday signaled that the sun was regaining control, the clouds retreating, and the weather clearing. This understanding shaped daily activities. Farmers would delay planting or harvesting briefly during the fog and any short showers, but know that the day would likely brighten soon, allowing work to continue. Ancient texts and agricultural calendars from the Middle Ages make reference to fog and its weather implications. While the language was often poetic or symbolic, the observations were empirical. Naturalists and chroniclers noted the cycles of mist and sun, recording how fog heralded moisture, but also swift improvement. Such knowledge was vital in an era when prolonged rain could ruin crops and disrupt livelihoods. This lore was not limited to Europe. In East Asia, where fog is a frequent visitor to mountainous and riverine landscapes, similar beliefs existed. Traditional Chinese agricultural guides described morning fog as a sign of short showers and a precursor to bright weather. Indigenous peoples in North America also interpreted fog as part of the natural cycle, integrating its appearance and dissipation into their environmental understanding. The emotional and psychological dimensions of fog cannot be overlooked. Morning fog, with its ethereal beauty and quiet hush, evokes feelings of mystery and anticipation. It cloaks the world in softness, blurring familiar shapes and inviting reflection. Yet for those who depend on the weather, this beauty carries practical meaning, a reminder that even when the day begins shrouded, clarity and light often follow swiftly. Today, despite our advanced forecasting technologies, the sight of thick morning fog still carries resonance. Walkers and farmers alike recognize the promise it holds, that any rain will be brief and the sun will soon reclaim the sky. It remains a living link to the ancestral knowledge rooted in careful observation and an intimate bond with the environment. So, next time you awaken to a heavy fog rolling across fields or swirling through trees, remember you are witnessing a natural sign steeped in history. The fog is not merely a weather condition, but a story told by the earth itself. A message of passing storms and returning light, a whisper that the day will clear and the sun will shine once again. Cracked ground with no wind meant drought. For millennia, the health of the soil has been the heartbeat of human survival. Across ancient villages and farming communities, every crack in the earth was read as a sign. Every whisper of the wind carried meaning. Among the most feared omens was the sight of cracked, parched ground combined with a sudden, unnatural stillness, when the breeze died completely. Elders would gather and warn. This silence and rupture meant drought was coming, and it would last for weeks. This was not just a superstition, but hard-earned wisdom born from centuries of close observation. Imagine a small farming village in the heat of summer. The fields lie bare under a relentless sun. Slowly, the soil begins to dry and shrink, fracturing into deep fissures that zigzag across the earth like scars. At the same time, the once gentle winds cease. The usual rustling of leaves, the cooling breath that offers respite from the heat, disappears. The air hangs heavy and motionless, almost suffocating. This eerie combination was the visual and sensory alarm bell for ancient communities. Why did cracked ground paired with still air predict drought? Scientifically, this phenomenon marks a prolonged period of dryness. Soil loses moisture, shrinking and breaking apart as it bakes in the sun. The absence of wind indicates a stagnant atmosphere, often a high-pressure system locking the weather into a hot, dry pattern with little chance of rain. These conditions could persist for days or weeks, with devastating consequences for crops, livestock, and human health. In agrarian societies, Drought was one of the greatest threats. Without water, fields withered, wells ran dry, and famine loomed. Crops that took months to grow could fail overnight. Livestock weakened and perished. The community's survival was at stake. Elders' warnings about cracked earth and stillness were not just folklore. They were critical survival knowledge passed down through generations. Historical accounts from Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas all attest to this understanding. Across cultures, elders and farmers alike recognized that the earth itself was speaking through its fractures and the silence of the wind. In some traditions, the cracked soil was seen as the earth's thirst, a painful cry for relief. The still air was the breath held too long, signaling an imbalance in nature. These signs shaped daily life and long-term planning. When the ground cracked and the air stilled, farmers knew to conserve water, prioritize certain crops, and prepare for hardship. Communities might organize efforts to dig deeper wells, store food, or pray for rain. Rituals and ceremonies were often held to appeal to the forces believed to govern rain and fertility, blending practical response with spiritual hope. The connection between cracked soil and drought also informed early science. Observers noted that these visible signs were reliable indicators of weather patterns. Before modern meteorology, such natural forecasting was invaluable. It allowed people to anticipate and adapt, improving their chances of survival. Even now, with satellites and weather models, the image of cracked earth under a hot sun remains a powerful symbol of drought's impact. The absence of wind in these moments still signals an oppressive stagnation in the atmosphere, a reminder of nature's cycles and extremes. So, when you see parched ground split into jagged lines and feel the unusual silence of a windless day, remember the ancient wisdom it carries. The earth is speaking, the air is still, and the warning is clear. A dry spell is upon us, and we must listen, prepare, and endure. Soot. Falling from chimneys meant humidity. For centuries, villagers watched the humble chimney with a wary eye, knowing that when soot flakes began to drift down from above and fall into their homes, it was no mere accident of the hearth. This falling soot was a subtle but powerful sign that the atmosphere was shifting, pressure was dropping, humidity was rising, and moisture-laden weather was approaching. To those who lived close to the land, soot falling from chimneys was an unspoken warning, a whisper from the sky that rain or storms were soon to come. The phenomenon is rooted in the physics of air pressure and humidity. When atmospheric pressure decreases ahead of an approaching low-pressure system, the air becomes less dense and moisture content increases. This change causes subtle shifts in air currents and drafts inside chimneys. Normally, warm air rises steadily through the chimney, carrying smoke and soot particles upward and out. But as pressure drops and moisture saturates the air, these updrafts weaken or even reverse momentarily, allowing soot flakes and dust to fall back down into the home. This natural barometer was observed and recorded in folk wisdom across many cultures. European peasants spoke of the soot that falls before the rain, recognizing that when their hearths scattered black flakes indoors, a storm was gathering beyond the horizon. The phrase became a weather proverb, repeated and trusted, embedded into the oral traditions that governed daily life. The falling soot was more than a nuisance, it was a signal with practical consequences. Farmers, sailors, and travelers knew that this meant damp weather was imminent, prompting preparations to protect crops, secure livestock, and postpone journeys. In an age without scientific instruments, such signs were essential for survival and well-being. Beyond Europe, similar observations appeared worldwide. Indigenous communities often incorporated chimney or hearth smoke behavior into their environmental knowledge. The delicate balance of smoke, soot, and air currents was read like a page in nature's book, teaching respect for the invisible forces shaping life. The cultural resonance of this sign extended beyond mere weather prediction. Soot falling indoors sometimes symbolized the restless breath of the earth itself, a reminder that the boundaries between indoors and outdoors, human and nature, were fluid and interconnected. It underscored how intimately people lived with the elements, perceiving and respecting their power in everyday details. Modern science confirms these ancient insights. The relationship between atmospheric pressure changes and chimney draft dynamics explains why soot behaves this way before storms. Yet, the poetry and practical wisdom carried by this sign remain alive, a testament to humanity's enduring quest to read the subtle language of the environment. So, next time you notice tiny black flakes drifting down from a chimney into a room, remember you are witnessing a phenomenon that has guided countless generations. Those falling specks are more than residue from fire. They are a natural alert, a messenger from the sky about the coming dampness and weather change. It's a quiet, black herald, bridging past and present, reminding us of our timeless bond with the air, the earth, and the unseen forces that govern the weather we live by. Stars twinkling violently meant rain. Throughout human history, the night sky has served as a vast canvas of signs and portents, guiding travelers, farmers, and sailors alike. Among the many celestial clues interpreted by ancient peoples, the behavior of stars, especially their twinkling, held a special place. When stars appeared to flicker violently, their light shifting rapidly and unevenly, it was more than just a dazzling display. In particular, stars that twinkled intensely, often with a reddish hue, were understood as omens of turbulent weather and impending rain. This belief, rooted in careful observation and cultural tradition, exemplifies humanity's timeless effort to read the cosmos for earthly guidance. The phenomenon of stars twinkling, known scientifically as stellar scintillation, is caused by the distortion of starlight as it passes through layers of Earth's atmosphere. Atmospheric turbulence, wind patterns, temperature variations, and moisture all contribute to how stars appear to shimmer. When the air is stable and dry, stars shine steadily. When the atmosphere is unsettled, their light flickers wildly. Ancient observers, keenly attuned to these variations, learned to associate violent twinkling with atmospheric instability, conditions often preceding storms and rain. Red stars, or those appearing reddish due to their intrinsic color or atmospheric effects, were particularly noted. The reddish tint can be intensified by scattering of light through dust and moisture-laden air, signaling increased humidity and airborne particles. This coloration, combined with erratic twinkling, heightened the sense of foreboding, alerting observers that the weather was likely to worsen soon. Farmers and sailors relied on these celestial cues to prepare for sudden showers, protecting crops, livestock, and vessels from unexpected deluges. Historical records from diverse cultures reveal a rich tradition of interpreting star behavior as a weather forecast. In maritime societies, where night travel was common, watching the stars' stability was a matter of safety. In rural farming communities, elders passed down knowledge about how to read the sky, linking star twinkling with changing winds and rain. Folklore often captured this wisdom in poetic form, preserving it through generations as both practical advice and cultural heritage. Beyond their meteorological significance, violently twinkling stars inspired awe and reverence. They were seen as messengers from the heavens, their flickering light a cosmic language conveying the mood of the skies. The interplay of science and superstition shaped how people understood these signs, interpreting them as warnings from the natural world and, sometimes, as omens from the divine. Modern science confirms the connection between atmospheric turbulence and stellar scintillation, explaining the physical causes behind this age-old observation. Yet, despite advances in meteorology, the vivid imagery of flickering stars signaling rain continues to captivate and inform. In many parts of the world, people still look to the night sky with the same attentive gaze, finding comfort and guidance in these ancient celestial messages. This belief highlights the profound interconnection between earth and sky, a relationship in which humans find patterns and meaning amid nature's complexity. The violent twinkling of stars before rain reminds us that even distant lights carry echoes of our planet's changing conditions, linking the vast cosmos to the intimate experience of weather. In essence, the warning encoded in the flicker of red, twinkling stars is a testament to humanity's enduring quest to understand and anticipate nature's shifts. It is a poetic fusion of observation, culture, and survival, passed down through millennia. The next time you gaze upward and notice stars dancing fiercely against the dark sky, remember that you are witnessing a timeless weather oracle, a sparkling forecast whispered from the heavens that rain and turbulence may be near. Roosters. Crowing at night meant weather chaos. For millennia, the rooster's crow has marked the dawn, a natural alarm that awakens villages and farms, signaling the arrival of a new day. But when that familiar call breaks the silence after dark, it unsettles more than just the ears. It stirs ancient fears and whispers of unnatural forces at play. Across cultures and centuries, the phenomenon of roosters crowing at night was never taken lightly. It was more than superstition or bad luck. It was a dire omen, often foretelling chaos in the weather, wild winds, fierce hailstorms, and unpredictable tempests threatening the land and those who toiled it. In a time before barometers and meteorological science, humans looked to nature's irregularities as messages. Roosters, attuned to subtle changes in their environment, often reacted to atmospheric disturbances that preceded volatile weather. Their crowing after dusk was a behavioral response triggered by these disturbances, a natural alert that something was amiss in the skies above. Villagers, knowing this, interpreted such calls as warnings, signs that the calm of night was about to be shattered by the wrath of the elements. Historical records from Europe reveal the gravity of this belief. Medieval farmers and townsfolk passed down tales of nights when roosters crowed under moonlight or in darkness, moments soon followed by tempestuous weather. These episodes became ingrained in folklore, with sayings warning that a rooster's night crow presaged windstorms that tore through fields or hail that battered crops mercilessly. This understanding shaped behavior. On nights when roosters crowed after dark, people would secure homes, tie down livestock, and prepare for sudden, violent weather. The symbolic weight of the rooster in folklore extended beyond its role as a weather oracle. In many cultures, the rooster was a guardian against evil, a herald of light over darkness. Its crow was believed to ward off spirits and demons. So when a rooster crowed at night, a time traditionally associated with malevolent forces, it was seen as a signal that nature itself was unbalanced, that the boundary between order and chaos was trembling. The weather chaos it foretold was both literal and metaphorical, reflecting fears of disruption in the natural and social order. Beyond Europe, similar beliefs are found worldwide. In parts of Asia, roosters crowing outside their normal times were linked to spiritual disturbances and forecasts of storms. Indigenous peoples in the Americas also noted unusual animal behaviors as omens, with roosters' irregular calls tied to approaching severe weather. This universality underscores a fundamental human impulse to seek meaning and predictability in the rhythms of nature, especially when survival was at stake. From a scientific standpoint, The behavior of roosters crowing at night can be linked to their sensitivity to environmental cues, such as changes in light, temperature, and atmospheric pressure. Approaching storms often cause fluctuations in these factors, disrupting the circadian rhythms of animals. The rooster's vocal response is a manifestation of this disturbance, an instinctive reaction to the altered environment. While modern science explains the mechanism, the ancient interpretation gave it profound cultural and practical significance. The anticipation of weather chaos following a nocturnal crow was not without basis. Storms often bring sudden gusts of wind and hail, phenomena that can devastate crops and property. For agrarian societies, predicting and preparing for such events was critical. The rooster's midnight alarm became a vital part of this early warning system, integrated with other signs from the sky and land, the scent of rain in the air, the sudden stillness or frenzy of birds, the rolling clouds on the horizon. Emotionally and psychologically, the rooster's night crow resonated as a symbol of anxiety and caution. It was a sound that pierced the calm of darkness, alerting communities that the familiar cycle of day and night was disrupted and that vigilance was required. Stories of night-crowing roosters became cautionary tales, warnings passed to children and travelers alike about respecting nature's unpredictable power. In today's world, where weather warnings come from satellites and sensors, the image of a rooster crowing at night remains evocative. It reminds us of an era when humans listened closely to every unusual sound and movement in the natural world, drawing knowledge and comfort from it. For those in rural areas, the behavior of their animals still holds meaning, and a rooster's unexpected call can stir a quiet awareness that the weather may soon turn. Next time you hear a rooster crow after dark, imagine the centuries of watchers who heard the same and braced themselves for what was coming. It is a voice from the past, a call signaling that the natural order is shifting and that the wild forces of weather are on the move. It is a reminder that beneath the calm surface of night, the air may be alive with storms waiting to be born. The smell of flowers at night meant change. Long before the advent of modern weather instruments, humans depended on the whispers of nature to guide them through the uncertainties of the elements. Among these subtle signs, one of the most evocative and mysterious was the scent carried on the night air. The sudden, sweet fragrance of flowers blooming or releasing their perfume after sundown, sometimes unexpectedly or out of season. This delicate but unmistakable smell was more than a sensory delight. It was a signal, a message deeply embedded in folklore and agricultural wisdom, foretelling a change in the winds or the approach of storms. The perception of flower scents at night has fascinated cultures across the world for centuries. In agrarian societies, where timing was everything, the fragrance of blossoms was tied not only to beauty, but to survival. When flowers seemed to bloom or their scents became stronger in the stillness of night, especially when such occurrences defied seasonal expectations, villagers interpreted these as harbingers of shifting atmospheric conditions. They understood that nature's aromatic signals often preceded tangible changes in the weather, gusts of wind that could herald storms or shifts in temperature and humidity. This belief found roots in the observation of plant behavior and environmental interaction. Many flowers release their scents more intensely at night. A strategy evolved to attract nocturnal pollinators like moths and bats. But the potency and timing of these fragrances can be influenced by changes in humidity, temperature, and air pressure, factors closely tied to weather fronts moving through an area. When a sudden rush of fragrant air followed sundown, it indicated that the wind was shifting direction or strength, often bringing moisture and unsettled weather with it. Historical texts and folk traditions from Europe, Asia, and the Americas capture this phenomenon in poetic and practical terms. In medieval European farming communities, the night smell of flowers was a part of the natural lore passed down to prepare for upcoming rains or storms. Farmers learned to heed these scents alongside other signs, the behavior of animals, the movement of clouds, and the feel of the air. This multisensory approach to weather prediction was essential in a world where a sudden storm could mean disaster for crops and livelihood. In parts of Asia, ancient Chinese agricultural guides documented the relationship between floral scents and weather changes, noting that an unusual sweetness in the night air often preceded seasonal rains or winds. Indigenous peoples in the Americas similarly interpreted changes in natural fragrances as messages from the land, integrating these signs into rituals and environmental stewardship practices. The smell of flowers at night also carries a symbolic dimension, entwining natural observation with human emotion and mythology. Flowers have long been symbols of renewal, change, and the passage of time. Their scents evoke feelings of hope, anticipation, and sometimes forewarning. The sudden appearance of these fragrances after sunset can stir a sense of mystery, as if the earth itself were breathing a secret message into the night. From a scientific perspective, the strength and timing of floral scents depend on environmental conditions. Higher humidity enhances the diffusion of aromatic compounds, making scents more noticeable. Changes in temperature and barometric pressure affect how these scents travel, often intensifying them when weather fronts approach. Thus, the ancient observation that sweet night scents signal shifting weather finds grounding in the physical interactions between plants and atmosphere. The emotional resonance of these floral whispers in the dark cannot be overstated. For generations, people have walked by moonlight, drawn by unexpected sweetness, feeling both comfort and unease, knowing that nature's beauty often comes with warnings. The night smell of flowers was a gentle yet profound alert, urging attention to the unseen forces gathering beyond the horizon. Today, even with satellites and advanced meteorology, the scent of flowers at night continues to hold meaning. Gardeners, hikers, and rural dwellers who notice these sudden fragrances understand that they are part of a long tradition of reading nature's subtle cues. It is a living link to a time when survival depended on the senses, on listening and smelling the messages carried by the wind. So, when you find yourself enveloped by the sweet, unexpected scent of flowers after dusk, remember that you are partaking in an ancient dialogue. You are receiving a message carried by the shifting winds, a promise that change is coming, that the air is alive with movement, and that the weather's story is unfolding just beyond the night's quiet veil.